type it in there. Sometimes we do like pull up chat in the bottom of the screen, but you're not like required to read it or respond to it or anything like that. And then once in a while, I guess when I'm trying to change topics or get in.
Everybody, so we're just gonna wait for the main stuff to start. Cause you know what? Gotta be honest, the thing that's gonna get me that gets me about this roundtable is I'm looking at the people on it, and I don't see a lot of room for disagreement. I don't think we're gonna like get at each other's throats. I don't know what we're gonna disagree on. You know? What was I playing? I was playing Hearts of Iron 4, also known as Hoi 4. So I don't know what's gonna happen. We'll see.
Debating one way or the other. Outside of that, is there any questions? No.
Nope.
All right.
Pretty good.
All right. Well, we got like 10 minutes, so you guys can do your thing. Dylan, are you able to hear everybody?
I can hear everything fine.
Okay, cool. Oh yeah, and then you guys have like buttons at the bottom to mute, though it seems like most of you already found those buttons.
Okay, so we have 10 minutes. I was not made aware we were gonna have 10 more minutes before start time. Okay. What's my outro song? Okay, my outro song. I'll tell you guys. Let me see if I can. Okay, so my outro song is something called. It's the outro song also for an anime called Banana Fish, which was a. I don't know what to call it besides it's like a gay. It's a gay show. It's a show. It's a gay show. It's a gay show about gangs. It's yaoi. And I really like the anime, so I also really like the song, so I just use it for outros because I think it sounds good. I think it's memorable. So I come up with controversial issues. Well, no, I want to have a diverse set of opinions on a show, and I'm looking at the topics, which include rent control, possibly cancel culture, and how do we change political Twitch. And it seems to all be just the same. Like, I don't see anything we're going to disagree on, right? I don't see it. Yeah, that's why I'm looking at the guests here, and I'm just kind of sitting here stumped. Like, what are we gonna debate? You know, I just don't know. I could LARP as a conservative. Oh, rent control. Ooh, rent control. Look. Look, I think the problem is a housing shortage, not a... I think we have just too scarcity when it comes to homes, you know? I'd rather support public housing, personally. I mean, I could support maybe, like, some rent control legislation if it's, like, tied to market rates, but... and to some extent... like, rent control to stop gouging, for example. But... I mean, I don't know. You redeems tell a story, do you get one? What's a good story? What's a decent story? What about... Story. Story. I'm trying to think of a story. Was that the Okada song earlier? It was. For first Canvas experience. Um First Canvas experience. It's nothing interesting to talk about there. Man, I'm really trying to think of a story here, and I think you guys really tapped out all my stories. Oh, I don't know if you guys did this, but when I was in elementary school, there was this thing that we called the gauntlet, right? And what we would do is people would get on the swing and they'd all start swinging back and forth, and you'd have to run in between them, right? You'd have to just run in between these people. And it was really stupid. It was really dangerous, but everyone ended up doing that. So where everybody was swinging back and forth on the swings and people just run through it. And we called it the gauntlet. And there's no story attached to it. It was just a stupid thing we did. Another thing I liked to do when I was a kid was get as high as physically possible on the swing and then just jump off. And I remember doing that down a hill a few times. And once I did it, and my head went straight into like a rock. And at the same exact time I hit that rock, the bell hit for recess to be over. And hey, happy birthday, Dylan. Hey, they all wishing me happy birthday. What the hell? Was I not here for that? Did they wish me a happy birthday and I wasn't on stream? I wasn't listening? Well, we'll never know. Anyway, so it happened at the same exact time, and I think the ring of the bell ringed at just the right frequency to stop me from getting brain damage. It's complete nonsense what I just said, but it's what I wholeheartedly believe, because I should have gotten brain damage. I mean, I went off of a swing straight into like a rock, face first. That should have been brain damage. For anyone with like 2 brain cells could figure that out. Like,
Cool. And then Dylan.
Hi, I'm a politics streamer. I'm a progressive Democrat. I cover a lot of foreign affairs, a lot of foreign policy in the Middle East and the Indo-Pacific region. I also host a roundtable every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is called the Hippy Dippy Roundtable. It's a really great show, and yeah, my stream might be a little weird right now because I'm in between homes, but I'm still trying to do our best to have a decent show over here.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate you joining us. And then last but not least, Destiny.
Hi, I'm Destiny. I do politics and philosophy sometimes. Most well known for my professional level Minecraft and Factorio and Dyson Sphere program gameplay at the moment, though.
Awesome. All right.
Should I also have mentioned it's my birthday and therefore I should get sympathy?
Yeah, they've
Okay,
had a lot of happy birthdays in the chat as well. Happy birthday, Dylan. All right. So we'll start off with rent control. Riley, I saw you doing some research earlier, so you want to kick it off with some opinions on rent control. And it's not just rent control, but even if you find some parts of like rent control or the ideas of rent control useful.
Yeah, so I mean, like, I don't know, I probably wouldn't call that research. It was more just me asking my chat and trying to get some feedback. Generally, like, what is a good opinion on here? So basically, like, I start from the position that I want to maximize the amount of affordable housing for people, or the ability for people in our society to be able to access adequate housing, right? Like, that's essentially where I'm starting from. And so rent control, the idea of putting caps onto the prices or like the amount that like private landlords could increase rent, consistent with inflation or not consistent. It sounds like a really good idea, but I'm not entirely sold on it. It seems like it could work under certain circumstances because basically the problems that you seem to get into are if you put rent control, then like the first major thing you're going to run into is that you're going to de-incentivize a lot of people from, you're going to de-incentivize private investors from investing in housing. And that can be a problem because then you're going to end up with lower amounts of housing. And so you're not going to be able to accomplish the initial goal, which was getting people into the housing to begin with, because you're going to have less of it. And so then the question is, okay, so then what can we do if we want to be able to have rent control to be able to deal with that issue? And there's like a couple options, right? You could have certain government programs, like for example, you could offer some kind of like benefit to people who engage in rent control or private investors who engage in rent control, maybe something like a tax incentive program or like a tax credit program or something similar, right? You could have government subsidized housing, and that seems like it could be like a good offset. So maybe in like certain development areas, you could have like some degree of rent control, or you could impose certain rent control, and then also have the government subsidized to fund the development of some of the housing in that development, but not all of it. You could do a combination of the two. You could possibly do certain types of land taxes to incentivize the development of affordable housing instead of like developing other types of like housing that would not be necessarily sold as much, or the development of property into something aside from housing. But it just seems to me, and I'll just kind of leave it here, that like rent control on its own doesn't usually seem to be sufficient. It seems like usually we need something else. Otherwise, like that on its own doesn't actually lead to the outcomes that we want, which is providing more affordable housing to people who need it.
Okay, cool. We'll open it up from there. Whoever wants to can jump in.
I guess we should start. I don't know, or I guess I'll give my quick spiel. I think rent control kind of sucks. I think the three big problems for rent control is that it only favors people that currently live there. It doesn't really help poor people or any particular working class group of people. It's just whoever currently lives there, which could be good, could be bad. It hurts new workers that are moving into an area. That pain is a little bit harder to see. You can't see the people that would have otherwise moved to some area that couldn't afford to, because rent control, decrease the availability of new area for people to live in. And then it doesn't fix the fundamental problem with housing prices, which is that usually there are just too few places for people to live. It's like a basic like physics thing. Like it's just not possible to have everybody moving into like 4 cities in a country. There's just limited land available. The only thing you can really do is zone more property, and there's no other solution, I don't think. Or I guess building up and up and up and up and up. But that causes other problems like traffic congestion and everything. For side things, I think Riley kind of brought this up. It hurts reinvestment. People don't want to reinvest in property that's rent controlled because there's no future profits. It causes people to convert those units into like condos and stuff, because why rent them if the future income is capped. It discourages future property investment for surrounding property because if some units get rent controlled, people are worried that it'll be extended to other units. And then it encourages the overconsumption of housing where people aren't moving as they should be because if they're in a good rent controlled unit, they feel like they don't want to give it up. Is there anybody in favor of rent control?
Yeah, is there anybody at all?
That's what I'm wondering too.
That works.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Damn, we solved it.
You want me?
Good
I
job,
could
everyone.
just be contrarian. Well, Destiny, I really hate how you fucking despise poor people. That's absolutely awful. And we should, make it. We just give everybody a house for free.
Very true.
Well, I mean, we did have a side topic to replace rent control. If you guys want to move to that one instead.
Oh God, we want to just talk drama. Is that what we're going to do immediately?
I mean, what drama? You mean the other topic or the?
Yeah, the other one. That was like the Eminem. What's even happening with that? Or I don't want to ask that. That's not something that we want to pursue talking about. But like, I'm not even like I haven't touched that. It just hasn't been of interest to me whatsoever.
Well, I mean, I guess the conversation around it is like, do you cancel people for things that happened a long time ago while those things were somewhat of a norm? So like if Eminem said the F slur 10, 15 years ago, do we cancel him now even though he's apologized for it and moved on? Do we cancel Dr. Seuss for racist ideas or racist things even though that was somewhat of a norm back then? I think it's not so much drama, but more the idea of like, how do we handle holding people accountable for things that didn't necessarily seem wrong at the time?
I think the little Disney disclaimer where they're like, we don't alter these cartoons.
So I guess
they were
Ahrelevant, you want to?
Oh shit.
Yeah, go ahead, Dustin.
Yeah.
Oh wait. Oh yeah. I was gonna say I think the little Disney disclaimer where it's like these cartoons were a product of their time. We recognize that they represent poor stereotypes and they're bad, but we're not going to alter them because to do so would be a disservice to what people, whatever, blah blah blah. I think that's a good way to do it. I think that if you are in an area where if you're trying to go back in time to see if people did things that were like cancelable, like under our current understanding of social issues, then I think you should just scrap like all art and all everything from your life and just be a robot and go, I don't know, play mobile games or something with your whole time. Cause like everything is going to be problematic at some point in time. Like if we end up getting to like lab grown meat, 30 years in the future, then literally every single figure that anybody thinks is good right now is going to be canceled because they're not a vegan or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like it's just a really stupid table to run down, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I mean,
go ahead.
I mean, I would generally agree with that sentiment. I don't really like the idea. I very much prefer the idea of people who are in a certain time period, understanding that time period does have a certain like limit to even the like optimal good, I guess somebody or ethical somebody could be, like Disney was kind of pointing to. Everybody who is not vegan will be seen as ethically inferior here in the future. That's just going to happen. And should we be canceled because we weren't vegan like right now? Like, come on, right? So in my opinion, right, it really does depend on like the whether or not we believe that their apparatus for the decisions that they made in the past is consistent with right now, or they changed it or what have you. So like if it's just like, I don't know, they really didn't like gay people in the past for the F slur or what have you, that Eminem has rectified that. And as long as that's fine, then I mean we're square. I mean, I don't think there's anything else that doesn't like just essentially destroy what I would consider to be a time-wise approach on understanding the use of like pejoratives.
So I don't want to like, I don't think when we talk about Dr. Seuss specifically, this is somebody who produced media that is just categorically racist. I'm not saying like it's on the line, like it said something like it was something that was a little it was like, Elio, what would I put in the zoo? And then like a white man stands up, this black person. Like that's like the level we're talking about here, right? Or how he promoted the idea that Japanese people are fifth columnists, how he like drew cartoons with them shoveling TNT from the fifth column station. If you don't know what that means people who are going to undermine the country from within, helping to promote what led to one of the worst things we did during the Second World War, which was Japanese internment. He helped kind of fan the flames of that with the cartoons he produced. So I think we can acknowledge that and still appreciate the media he produced out there that wasn't terribly racist, right? We can appreciate the good things people did while acknowledging the bad things people did. A great example would probably be like, I don't know, like a founding father who's like, free speech is a good thing. He'd be like, oh yeah, I also agree with free speech. Probably, but that racist thing he said, or the fact that he didn't have a huge problem with slavery, that would be something that wouldn't look favorably upon. And when it comes to me generally like concluding if somebody's a good guy overall or bad guy overall, it's me just simply like doing the mental math of have they done more good things than bad things, right? I'm not gonna like wash away all of Hitler's crimes because he pet a dog and was nice to animals, right? But I'm also not going to throw Martin Luther King out the window because he wasn't 100% accepting of like gay rights.
I think the bigger question is, what do we hope to achieve with cancel culture? Canceling someone who, for example, is dead doesn't really do much because it's not like they can apologize for their crimes.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're just, okay, well, this person did a bad thing. Okay, cool. That's less of like cancel culture and more of like, hey, this is what happened in history. Cool. We can all agree on this. And we know that this person was not like the saint that they were. But trying to cancel people who are currently alive, who have already like apologized or like they say like, okay, like I understand why the things I did were wrong. That makes sense, right? Because you want them to change their behavior so they're not using any of their platform to spread harmful messaging or to convince people that what they're saying is right. So like, I think the old one is like James Charles getting canceled for saying something transphobic. He like went back and he said like, I've like reevaluated my opinions on this and I realized how this was harmful and I'm sorry for saying this and I will try to like be better on my platform because I understand that like the way that I currently acted wasn't acceptable. Just as an example, I'm not sure about the details of the situation.
So I do think we should have like an opportunity for people to grow and expand. I believe in reformative justice. I don't believe it only on like a criminal justice level. I believe it on an individual level as well. For example, I don't have, there's no such thing as a permanent ban in my chat. There, like eventually, if you really show like the intent to reform, you eventually can be let back in my chat, no matter what you've said or done. Right? Most of the people don't take opportunity of that because they don't care to be in my community. They just wanted to like say an evil racial slur in my chat. But I would also like to throw out there, what if somebody's apologized for something, but also didn't show an ability to change overall? For example, Rush Limbaugh is a great example of this, right? This is somebody who apologized for a segment making fun of gay people who died of AIDS in the 80s. But then as early back as 2015, he was comparing homosexuality to bestiality. Somebody who who was able to take a step back on the stuff that was openly reprehensible on its face even at the time, but still continue to perpetuate stereotypes and disgusting ideas about gay people up until the gavel was hit on gay marriage. And even past that, I'm pretty sure we can still find a few statements of him where he didn't talk about it the same amount, but he never apologized for stuff like that. He never repented for stuff like that. And that was stuff he did like only like 6 years ago on his radio show. And when you look at the career of Rush Limbaugh, that's not a long time ago.
All right. Does anybody think that he should have been canceled, or had parts of his books canceled?
Like
I mean,
Dr.
there's
Seuss
6
or Rush
books
Limbaugh?
there's 6 books that are no longer being published at all. And Dylan, you're saying that they're like that they were outwardly racist, right?
I'm saying the zoo one most certainly was. I don't know. I haven't read the other ones, but the zoo one, like one of it was like a white man stands up and it's like, I want to put this person in a turban in a cage at the zoo. Like that's pretty like openly like that's dehumanizing of black people. Now my thing is like either you change the media so it's no longer racist, so you either like take that page out or you just get rid of it altogether. If you take the page out, then you can and acknowledge the history of the work, then I don't see necessarily, because then you're removing the harm, right? Like it would be like, for instance, I'm from the DC area, and we have the Washington football team, right? Now, was the solution there to change the logo and change what we called the team, which was the Washington Redskins, or was it to just disband the team? Obviously, disbanding the team didn't like fix anything. The solution there would be to change the logo and change it, because it was literally a racial slur and you should not have a racial slur as a football team name.
Wasn't the point in that book though to be like more accepting? Like in the end, they like go to the circus or something like that instead of the zoo.
Yeah, but then, but I mean, the problem with
and
that,
they were finally accepted by people.
but wouldn't the problem be like if someone's like if someone walked up to someone like, I'm accepting, you're my favorite N-word. That's, while it's an accepting message generally, that's still racist, you know? Like, yeah, something can be racist but have good intent.
Okay, so you're saying the turban part is what's racist about it.
The racist would be like the caging of the person. Once I can try to find the exact page and try to look at it again. Maybe I'm wrong and it was like racism is bad and that was the message of the story, but looking at his other comics, I have a really hard time feeling that was the message.
Well, either way, Dylan, you were getting at a point that I'm actually kind of curious about, nonetheless, based on like where your mind was at. Would you say that literature that has like pretty overtly racist like parts in that literature, but it's not necessarily the overall themes, those books shouldn't be printed as well?
It depends on like what, like for instance, historical pieces
Sure.
are things like that. Like obviously, like if something's like racism existed, here's an example of it. You don't like take it out, like try to pretend
of
that.
course.
But,
yeah,
like,
of course.
But if I think that as long as you're careful with the work and you're educating people, like, hey, this is from a certain like era, and we're looking at this from a historical point of view, this piece of media, and when we examine and consume it, then you could possibly do it responsibly. But Dr. Seuss books are particularly targeted towards children, and I think either you're going to have that hard conversation with kids, but I don't think that's something you just like leave in the school library where you're not in an environment to explain the historical implications of that very racist depiction of a black person or of a Chinese person, etc.
Yeah, I can break bread with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the problem that they're in children's media is the real core of the issue. If they were adult pieces of media, I can understand you saying like, there's no reason to like destroy these books. We have plenty of like works that are like outwardly transphobic or sexist or homophobic or whatever. And we obviously value some level of free speech in America and not destroying people's works without them knowing or censoring them or whatever. But if it's towards children, like, I don't know if there's anything good about having children read racist stuff and integrate that into their like head while they're still developing their ideas about social norms and things like that. That doesn't seem good.
All right, I'm going to take nope, I'm taking the extreme position on this, okay? Because fuck you guys, all right? I'm going to argue, I think that all people that are problematic in the past should be instantly and permanently canceled when it comes to like entertainment and art, okay? For two big reasons, all right? Number one, there's only so much media that we can consume. I think it would make more sense that we have more modern heroes that more closely resemble like whatever current cultural values we have. So for instance, we wouldn't watch the same shows over and over and over again on TV that have like misogynistic or homophobic humor in it. We would watch newer shows that more closely resemble like the values that we currently have as a society. So I don't know why we wouldn't update like the type of art or the type of literature that we review either. It's not like there's a shortage of people trying to create like new media. So the idea that we would continue to read classics that were written by people that were highly problematic doesn't make any sense. Why enshrine that as part of our culture when we could update that and give somebody new a chance? So that's point number one. And the second point that I would move into on the back of that is I think that in doing so, in like creating new spaces and in getting rid of like the older problematic stuff, I think we also create the opportunity for newer authors and newer artists to come in that otherwise wouldn't have been represented in the past as well. So like in Dr. Seuss's books, I think it was estimated that like 98% of all the characters were white. And I'm willing to bet that if we look at like 99% of American media made before the 60s, like the vast majority that we study, especially like Eurocentric stuff, is all going to be white people as well. Why not study newer stuff that like more closely resembles the diversity that we're kind of like holding up in society, right? Why not maybe there'd be like places for newer authors to come in or newer artists to come in to create media for us to consume, because we can only consume so much. Why do we have to keep studying old stuff made by problematic people when we can have newer people that are more diverse that show our values, like creating media for us to consume? So there's my arguments for canceling everything that's old.
With that sort of thought process, would we also cancel Michael Jackson then and get rid of his music?
I mean, how many people still listen to Thriller? Let's be honest, right?
I mean,
That's
All
timeless.
right.
I
I
love it.
Timeless.
Can I hold on? Wait. Can I come in here? All right. I get the point. So like, I tend to agree with the idea that we shouldn't that like it can be important to still have these things in our culture. Maybe we have to change how we treat them. But like, I guess that it's kind of the same thing with like, dang it, the book. It's super controversial in schools. It has the N word in it. We all have read it in grade school growing up.
Huckleberry
Which one
Finn.
was it? Help me out
Huckleberry
here.
Finn.
Huckleberry Finn. Yeah.
I never
I
read
think that those
rip.
kinds of pieces of literature, like obviously, like we would all agree that like saying the N word in most contexts is pretty problematic in modern historical context, right? And so like, but I would still argue that it's important to be able to like at least in some way integrate like even problematic parts of our history or culture into education, because if not, then we end up creating a generation of morally lucky people. Or
How would you
people-
feel? Sure, but like, how would you feel to like? Let's look at something like children's poetry, right? Like,
Mhm.
what message does it send to society if you take somebody that was involved in like highly problematic caricatures of other people and you teach their stories over and over and over again, when we have a more diverse artist base today that's trying to break into that realm in terms of publishing stories? Like, I'm sure there are a million authors that are people of color that make awesome stories and awesome poems and awesome art for children, that they're just never going to have a chance to break into that because we obsessively study like older forms of art from people that were highly problematic. Why would we have them occupy those spaces that other people could fill instead?
Well, I mean,
I think that when we're saying it in terms of occupying spaces, we're describing it as if there's like a limited ability for people, like there's like a finite amount of space that people can occupy. But I think that there's like a way to be able to integrate, perhaps like in an education system, since we're talking about children right now, to be able to integrate education about simultaneously promoting these new types of artists or creators, while simultaneously also being able to educate people about artists that we've had in the past and historical figures in the past, which have had like a materially important impact or impacts on our culture and so our life today, but also be able to like educate people about why those things were problematic, why they are problematic today, but you know, specifically being able to convey the idea of like why, because if we don't convey that idea of why, then we're essentially not educating people for how to be able to combat those kind of ideas when they encounter it otherwise in their lives.
So, yeah, I understand that for sure. I just think there's a difference between the context of like a class showing problematic media and then the analysis and synthesis of that problematic media versus like that problematic media is like our standard media consumption. And then we also have to talk about how it's problematic. Like, I think those are two kind of different things.
I mean, is this like Dr. Seuss book, like what people consume? I mean, we're talking about it as if like people are still reading it nowadays. And I feel like that's probably not the case.
I mean, they are. My mom's a school teacher, and they have Dr. Seuss days. They read the Dr. Seuss books. They're in the library. They're in all of the classrooms.
well, sure, but the question is whether or not the more problematic ones are being read than the less problematic ones.
She said that they had to take all of those out of their libraries.
Well, sure. But yeah, I mean, to Destiny's Steelmanning point, I don't think it's like necessarily even a point to cancel. It's more of a point to promote newer artists. If we were to make your argument, take it, quite seriously, you would just promote newer artists with like a more favorable outlook on the dynamics that we want to be able to push inside of a society, and simultaneously hit Riley's point of educating on why some of the old literature, probably shouldn't be propagated in order to avoid the morally lucky people. I don't think you have to cancel them. You can just, or eliminate the books, but rather just promote the things that you want to promote and try and make those the general day-to-day cultural norm.
Can we define canceling? This is bothering me a massive amount. Like, how the
Sure.
fuck can you cancel Dr. Seuss? All right.
So I think that people view canceling as you held one position and now that position is being decreased is essentially what people view canceling. So I don't think anybody is truly talking about like banning the consumption of Dr. Seuss in society. More just that like if this was standard consumption for like second and third graders, maybe we replace that with something else, and then people view that as like canceling. Now, in regards to Dr. Seuss in particular, I believe there were 6 books that they said that they weren't going to publish anymore. So I guess you could argue that's canceling, but I think that obviously it's context dependent when you talk about canceling something.
Yeah, I guess I was referencing it in the capacity that you would cancel them, and you wouldn't in the capacity that they wouldn't print the books anymore at all.
Yeah, I mean, like I can agree with the idea of like I mean, like, it sounds like the former, like, not necessarily like saying that they weren't going to like publish the books anymore, but it sounds like when we're just talking about like calling attention to something which we didn't necessarily realize as a society did entail some problematic things at the time it was promulgated, but now we can realize it looking back with a historical lens. Like, just calling attention to that is probably fine. And if that's what canceling is, then fuck. I mean, like,
Yeah.
well, a lot of things are canceling then. I mean,
Well,
you know, like, then yeah, sure, totally. I'm all on board with the canceling train.
I mean, if you look at any generation, like between like older individuals watching Me TV and like younger individuals watching like Nicktoons, like there's gonna be a generational divide on the type of ideas about men and women or people of different backgrounds that are propagated, right? You'll see the modern Cartoon Network ads about like see color, be anti-racist. If you go back to BTV, you'll see John Wayne like, I don't know, hitting his wife or something. I have no clue what's going on BTV. And if you understand that, you can see that this stuff kind of evolves naturally. And I think acknowledging that this is probably something you shouldn't let children just consume unfiltered. But I think as long as we mean like, hey, this isn't just the thing we used to think it was. It's a little different, and it may be a little bit more nefarious now looking back. And we should, when we do consume it with a filter. I think there's nothing wrong with that, because we usually just naturally evolve away from this. I don't think there needs to be like some mass book burning of Dr. Seuss books to like erase them from history. So I guess it really does matter like what you mean by canceling. If it just means like acknowledging the dude was a racist, then yeah, he was a racist. If it means like we need to like pretend he never existed and wipe him off the face of the planet, well then that's just stupid. That's just you're just trying to deny history.
Yeah, I mean, the way I understand canceling is to where we want to take away their social power, right? So like on Twitter, like we want to have a bunch of people unfollow them so that whatever they're tweeting.
We should unfollow Dr. Seuss. I think that'll really hurt his feelings.
Yeah. Yeah, so like
Twitter. This is a real question. These are the most important things I need to know right now.
I don't know, but like when it comes to Dr. Seuss books, the only way that you can take away the social power is by getting rid of the books, right? Like I think Dylan, you made the point that like because they're for kids, that's probably the biggest problem. But when it comes to like Mein Kampf or the Huckleberry Finn or other books that are going to be read by adults, like I think that we all go into those with the understanding that they're going to be racist, right?
I mean, not necessarily. Like, I'm sure there's obviously people who read Mein Kampf and it's like, oh, dude, this guy's spitting facts. I'm sure there's people out there. There's actual racists, right? And it's not to pretend like adults can't be manipulated by media. Obviously, the way how Muslim people have been portrayed for the last 20 years shows that adults can also be manipulated by media to have very gross views of different vulnerable groups of people. I think that it's just like if you have the knowledge about a piece of media and its history, and you're able to watch it with that, then you can dissect it and like look at it with, I think, the correct perspective to not allow those types of things to sink into you. But if you're just going into it like blind, then you might those types of things can end up affecting you. I mean, we can pretend that like grown-ups are responsible enough to not have that type of stuff influence them, but we can see like how I don't think that's
Okay.
no, that's just not it. Sorry, I mean, like for example, like how recently with COVID, there's been a huge spike in anti-Asian hate crimes, and obviously the people were not smart enough to decode the fact that it's not every individual Asian person's fault that there is a pandemic touching everybody across the world. Like if they weren't smart enough to do that, then consuming racist media without that lens could also probably lead to a similar result.
Yeah, I don't think I was saying that they would go in like that they wouldn't become that the books wouldn't affect them any just because they're an adult. I'm just saying that because they're an adult, like we wouldn't stop them from reading it or try to unpublish the books.
Yeah, well, I don't think we should have a book ban if that's
get
what you're
rid of them.
proposing. No, I'm just saying like I'm just talking about personal responsibility and consumption of media and consumption of anything. Like I don't think we should ban big sodas, right? But I think people shouldn't just like consume them on the daily, you know?
Ahrelevant, were you trying to get in just a second ago? No. Okay. Yeah, I think I agree with your earlier point though, because like the Dr. Seuss books are for children. That's probably the bigger problem, and maybe unpublishing them is the best option there.
I mean, I'd still be fine with like publishing them basically like with a different purpose.
Yeah.
Like, you know, making it so that like they're published insofar as like they're used specifically as educational materials, right? I think that as long, like to me, the most important thing is just as long as society can recognize collectively the problems with these materials, then it doesn't seem like they can necessarily do the kind of harm that we're kind of saying that they would. Because it seems like the kind of harm we're all implying that these materials have is that they would like have a negative effect on our children or on like children who are exposed to them and kind of like plant certain ideas that we wouldn't want them to have, right? So if we're able to deal with that issue, then it seems like the materials themselves become relatively benign, right?
Yeah.
Or at least
But
that's
how-
my, please tell me if I'm not correct in that assumption.
How would we deal with that issue though? If like if we're reading these books to the kids, are you saying like we stop every time there's like a turban mentioned or something racist mentioned and then try to correct
I
it?
don't know. Maybe you just maybe you just have like a 5-minute session beforehand. Be like, hey kids, listen, we're going to read through this book. I want you to understand there's going to be certain kinds of themes or imagery that are seen throughout. These are normally connected to these historical contexts and usually are referenced to specifically disparage these types of people. And so just as we're reading through, understand that is implied to the audience to try and be like a disparaging treatment of those people and understand that, right? And stress that it's like a bad thing, right? I don't know, like we teach about like Nazi Germany and we're able to stress to our children that like the things that they did were bad. I feel like we're able to do that. Like if we're able to do that there, I feel like we can do that, you know, obviously to a different degree, but like with other forms of material. Like we do this with Huck Finn, you know? I feel like it's not a huge ask.
I think I would agree if the Dr. Seuss books weren't for like elementary school kids.
Yeah, I was
If it
gonna
like,
touch on that as well.
if it was for like middle school kids or maybe high schoolers, I can understand how they would have more critical thinking skills to be able to recognize like, oh, okay, these things are problematic. But I don't think kids are capable of recognizing the difference between like saying something to them like this is bad, by the way. I think the better format would be to just remove the books. And if they wanted to read them when they were like adults, they could read them or whatever. But like they shouldn't be like reading material for kids who are in elementary school, and they shouldn't be like in kids sections for libraries, I think.
I was going to say, I'm not sure if, so I was open to the idea that Denims just proposed there, but I'm not quite sold on it. I don't know. Maybe it's possible with the right amount of prep. Maybe elementary schoolers could do it, but I think Denim's concern is very real, that elementary schoolers just may not have the capacity to be able to do it because, yeah, I just don't. I mean, I imagine that like if you read Huck Finn to elementary schoolers, that wouldn't go too well, and things like that. So like I think just, you know, trying to understand exactly where the cutoff might be for certain groups of people to be able to ingest this would probably be in order, but I don't know. That's something that I believe should be investigated. I'm not really in a position to make a hard claim about that right now. I don't have enough information.
Like just hearing that off of like just hearing that makes sense. It's just that then we get into a question of like, all right, so at what age does it become fine for us to be able to teach like these kind of materials to children is my immediate next question, right? Like maybe kindergarten is like the steel man for like we all can look at that and be like, all right, their children may have a hard time understanding. Like I can get behind that. Like that seems like a decent argument. But then like at what point do children suddenly become like capable of understanding that they're being taught about something that is historically problematic? Like when is that threshold?
I mean, I would probably defer to like a developmental psychologist or something like that, right?
Well, I mean, I don't know. We try to make like hard lines like this for all sorts of things, like age of consent or something like that. Like not everybody's actually going to make it.
I mean, it's not necessarily that like people like us are going to be able to make the strongest argument for age of consent. It's probably going to be people that understand like a little bit more about how like perhaps the physical mechanisms of individuals' brains might work if we're talking about intellectual capacity, because I think we could all agree like a 3-year-old doesn't have the intellectual capacity and any reality to be able to provide consent or what have you, right? So if we're making that argument, but like usually consent is a little bit more about physical than just physical capacity, so that's a little different. But in this conversation, I mean, I feel like primarily my concern stems from the physical capacity to be able to comprehend a more complex narrative than, ooh, that brown guy do bad, the white guy is good by put him in cage, right? So like just, you know, a little bit higher order logic than that seems necessary, and I'd have to defer to somebody that has more expertise in the field, I would probably say I'm not going to make a claim at this moment.
Makes sense. So that we don't, because I don't know where this turned into an age of consent discussion. So can we talk about Eminem? Like, all right, so how does Eminem factor
Yeah.
in? All right, so children's book. All right, maybe that's not best for children, but we probably want to like still retain some way to be able to teach that maybe the people who are a little bit older. All right, so what did Eminem do that's cancelable that happened in the past? Like what was
Something
it?
that was really common in rap in the early 2000s. So rap was and 90s and 80s and 60s. Like rap has been historically like pretty homophobic. And Eminem uses the F slur even up through when was Rap God? 2013,
like 2018. Wasn't it 2018?
18? I'm pretty
Okay.
sure Rap God is older than 18.
I think it's like it was Marshall Mathers LP2. Like, yeah. So I know at the very least, I know that song had it. I don't know if he's used it past that, but so yeah. So I mean, like that's a lot of the old rap like just casually threw on F slurs or was homophobic. Like that's just what it was. People are saying that in a 2018 album he used the F slur as well. So.
And then why is it being brought up now? Like this seems like a very random thing. Like I can like, all right, so there's like two problems here. There's like two things that are coming to my mind, right? The first is like the actual like conversation on the merits. Like, is that cancelable, whatever we want to define that as? But then secondly, like, why is that being brought up now and not when it happened, or like or maybe it did get brought up when it happened, but like it's obviously like being like discussed again now. And why is it being discussed again now? Like, was there like a triggering event? Was there like he used it again, or he discussed it in the past, or like he apologized, or he doubled down on it? Like I could see like, here's my take on it. Like I could see a cancel, like an actually justifiable, like critical take against him. If someone, for example, asked him like, hey, you said this thing in the past, or you used this slur in a lot of your past materials, and that was incredibly harmful. How do you feel about it? Like, and like if he doubled down and be like, oh yeah, no, I stand by all of that 100%. Like that's still reflective of how I feel today. I feel like then we can be like, all right, that's pretty fucked up. But like, obviously if he's moved on from it, it doesn't really seem like, it seems really weird to bring up now if it's like more a product of the circumstances that, you know, he was operating in. I guess I'm just,
does anybody know why did this come up recently? Does anybody have any idea?
I mean, I feel like maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like the F slur was slowly migrated out of social norms to where like it was just an edgy thing to say for a long time, and then I believe it's like more recently within the last 3 years or so that it's become like just like up there with the N-word and everything else.
Yeah, so wait, I don't know if anybody actually cares about this since nobody seems to make these distinctions. The F slur wasn't used in the rap community because it was edgy, like maybe like gamers might use the F slur. The F slur was used in the rap community because the rap community was homophobic. That's like, I think some people don't care about the distinction, but that's like a really important distinction. It's like there was like a lot of homophobia like in the rap community. Like XXXTentacion, who's like a relatively recent person, right? I understand he's dead now, but like bragged about like almost beating the shit out of some guy in jail because he looked at him too long. And like people on that diss track, like Eminem, like called Tyler the Creator like the F slur. So like it's not just like they're just saying it to be edgy or whatever, you know. Or in Rap God, I remember that he's talking about I think it's the Insane Clown Posse, because he calls them gay basically and then uses an insult. It's not just that it's an edgy word, it's that like rap has a lot of like homophobia in it, or traditionally did. It wasn't just like using the word to be edgy. I just wanted to be clear on that.
Yeah, I mean, and this is something that has like a large effect. Like the influences on like popular music definitely have an effect on people. I remember growing up and like hearing that type of stuff in music and seeing how that would affect how the people around me treated gay people, and it definitely didn't make me feel comfortable about who I was, and it didn't make me want to like be public about who I was, and it definitely had an effect on me because I thought if people thought I was gay or knew that I liked guys, then I was going to be treated differently when I was growing up in middle school and high school, right? So I tried to generally keep it to myself until eventually I tried to be more up. But it definitely has a negative effect on things. And I think obviously if he's not doing it anymore and he's against it, then personally, good. Then I'm happy. Like, what more could I ask for? Like, do I need him like to like do like a rap song about how like gays are cool? Like, no, I just want him to stop having the negative impact. If he stopped having the negative impact, then like what more can I ask of the dude? Like, for example, the difference between him and Rush Limbaugh is Rush Limbaugh kept having a negative effect on the gay community up until he passed away. Eminem, I don't see that happening anymore, right? So what's the problem?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it rolls back to your Rush Limbaugh point where like the apology itself doesn't actually mean anything, right? It's the apology and more importantly, whether or not they continue doing it. So if he like says sorry and then like next week he makes another album where he uses the F slur even like once, it's like, okay, so like that was a lie. Got it. Cool. Like if he can stop using the word, that would cause less harm. And that's what cancel culture should be, right?
Okay, hold on. So someone gave me a link to basically an article talking about why this is happening. All right, so first, all right, so there's two things, right? First, the reason that's relevant right now for people who want to know or who care is because TikTok is making it relevant again. So, hooray!
Oh boy.
Yeah, I know, right? But I mean, like, basically, it's because a lot of people have been using songs from Eminem on TikTok. Which, and by virtue of a lot of people using those songs, they've come under a lot more scrutiny, hence why songs from 1999 are able to be canceled again or like come under a lot of controversy. But I mean, like, I don't know, even in, and I'm not sure if this is true, I'm just going off of what I'm reading right now, but like, according to his 2018 album, he continued this trend by using the F slur to call someone else.
Tyler.
Yeah, exactly. And so like,
who is actually
know, like,
homosexual, if I remember correctly, right?
Well, you'd say homosexual person. Okay, people first language.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if that excuses the use of that, right?
No.
I mean,
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that probably makes it even worse because he knows they're gay.
Correct.
And used it at them specifically for that reason, which makes it worse.
Right. I mean, like, as far like it's like the timing is weird. Yeah, but I mean, like, this is like 3 years ago. Like, that's not exactly like 1999, you know, like that's
Sure.
That's within just the past couple, like that's, you know, halfway through Trump presidency, which I mean feels like an eternity ago, but is really not that far away. And so like,
when was that? When was the last time he used it?
In his most
2018 album. Yeah.
So I know that I think it was in 2017 where he like apologized for using the F slur and then did like another live song with Elton John, like as another apology for, or to say like, hey, I'm cool with the gay people again, because I think he did it in like 2008 or 2007 as well. Did a a live performance with Elton John just to say like, hey, I don't hate gay people, and he hugged him on stage, and you know, all of that.
I can get that.
Touched him, like, said he didn't catch
I'm probably
it.
like this is.
Academic.
Well, I mean, like this seems like an indication I'm probably lacking context, but I mean, like right now the facts is I am aware of them are that. So I'm going to take that at face value. 2017, he made an apology, did the thing with Elton John, et cetera, like redemption arc, hooray. 2018 comes around, he does the same thing again. I mean, to me, usually the way I think of apologies, and I'm not sure if other people would adopt this framework, but I mean, like, generally the way I see apologies are more like indications that you can recognize that you did something which caused harm to at least someone else before, and that you're not going to do that thing again, right? Because otherwise, I don't know, like I think about people who have misgendered me when I was in the early in transition. You know, there are plenty of people who would do it unintentionally, and then they would be like, "Oh my God, Riley, I'm so sorry." And then they would forget about it, and then 2 days later they would do the same thing again and again and again. And eventually it's like, okay, listen, like I understand that you're saying that you're sorry, but it doesn't really seem like you actually are meaning it because you're not meaningfully changing your behavior, right? And so like he talked about in Sway. Hold on. The word I called him on that song was one of the first things I felt like this might be too far. My quest to hurt him. I realized I was hurting a lot of other people by saying it at the same time. I was mad for what was whatever. It was one of the things I kept going back to. I don't feel right with this. All right. So I mean, like, I don't know. Like, just be like, if he does something in 2017, like if he makes an apology in 2017 and then he goes and he does the same thing in 2018, even if he goes back and apologize, I don't know. Like, to me, the thing that usually indicates that you actually meaningfully recognize that you've done harm is like by taking steps to change your actions in the future, you know?
Well, yeah. So previously, this is kind of what I meant when I said change their apparatus to be able to come to that decision, whatever decision we consider to be cancelable or wrong in the first place. Don't really care about apologies. It seemed pretty cringe. Their reasoning or their mode for making the decision matters a little bit more to, or is all that matters, I would say. In relation to that, I'd rather nobody ever say sorry, but instead just change their action than everybody say sorry and never change their action, right? But I don't know. I have something else I want to talk about when we're that kind of leaps off this. So when we wrap this up, I kind of want to bring something up that's really connected.
The thing that gets me about this is because since we didn't catch it right away, we have no like indication if in the last 3 years or whatever he's like changed significantly or what. The problem about like somebody is it's better to catch it right away and then like harp on it then than to like wait till afterwards, because then they can say, oh, in the last 3 years I've changed so much, right?
Yeah.
Then they can just say like, oh well, the first apology I know I should have like kept to it, but in the last 3 years I've really changed. It's better to like get him like right now. So this is where we're in the position where he's gonna be saying, look, I changed. I changed so much. After the first time I said I changed, I didn't really change. I kept to it, but now I've changed. And now for the last 3, now he has the 3 years on us, and we got to make the determination if has he really changed. And that's what's difficult about this position is you got to like calculate that. And there's not really any way to do it. I guess you got to like just keep making sure he doesn't release albums with the F slur, which I mean I would assume after this he would probably stop, right?
I want to touch on something Riley said earlier about if he continues to do it, then what, right? I wanted to ask if we care about distinguishing between the artist or author of something and the actual work that they produce.
Mm-hmm.
In relation to like
the problem is though is that in the case of Eminem, the F slur is actually in his art, right?
Well, yeah, obviously your art might reflect certain things that are negative, right? In your own personality or your own personhood, right? I feel like if you are financially supporting the creators who make this, then it's definitely probably morally wrong, right? Because you're continuing to allow this behavior and you're supporting it financially or in some other way, right? But if you are enjoying pieces of work because you genuinely enjoy them, and I think this is a big problem people have with cancel culture. They don't want to stop watching or reading or listening to someone just because some people on the internet said, well, I don't like this, despite it being like one of their most favorite albums or like something that helped them get through really, really tough times or something, right? So do we ever want to distinguish between, okay, well, if we can consume this content in a way that doesn't benefit the creator, is that okay? Or is that still not okay?
Well, I mean, I also don't even know if not or consuming the content that benefits the creator or in a way that benefits the creator is even necessarily bad for the general populace, especially if you consider an extreme hypothetical, where in which let's assume that you, let's say, I don't know, play like a video game. It's like a 20-hour video game, but it drops the F slur once. Can I no longer buy that video game and enjoy the night? We
don't have to talk about a video game. How about the movie Clerks 2? It blew me away when I watched that a few years ago. They just casually drop an F slur in that movie. I totally forgot. I had no idea.
Yeah. It's like, can nobody ever buy that movie on DVD or do any of that without being a bad person? Is that entire piece of media just destroyed as far as like my ability to be able to purchase or consume it as an individual actor?
Well, I mean, what about Kevin Spacey being on House of Cards? All the things that he did, do they take him off the cast?
I would say if you're literally hiring somebody on a set that is significantly different than like me, like, or are you talking about like me watching the show?
Yeah, watching the show.
Oh yeah,
or them leaving him on.
I've watched that show like three times even after that. Like, listen, yeah, I don't disagree with the idea that like, what he did was wrong and what have you. But my consumption of an individual's art, like, I don't know, that's a decent example, but people also bring up the more extreme hypotheticals and stuff like that. Like I even listened to some Nazi music, some little music, made by Nazis and stuff like that in World War II. Some of those songs are bangers, absolute fucking bangers. And it's like, I'm not going to necessarily let a bad actor get in my way of consuming good media that I consider to be pleasurable for me to consume, even necessarily if they get some dividends from it. But because I can kind of like walk and chew gum at the same time. I could be like, yo, the media is hot, but
I think the strongest argument, I think that when it comes to like problematic actors, I think that you can enjoy them, but you should just give absolutely no money to them. And I think that this works out like in a lot of areas of our life. So something that I really enjoy doing is if I'm going out to eat, my server comes by, I'll usually give them like a 10 question problematic like racial sensitivity issue quiz. And if they get any of the answers wrong, I don't have to fucking tip them because my money does not go to racist people. 100%. That's my position. Fucking A.
So,
but seriously, we can probably
if
support. Like, I think it's okay to enjoy media that has some problematic aspects of it. It must be, of course, it is. But like, you should probably find ways to minimize the support of that author. Or not, I'm sorry, the support of that author, especially if they're continuing to create problematic media.
So, I mean, one thing for me is like John Bolton released a book on the Trump administration, right? And I have a very, very negative view of John Bolton, even though in that book, a lot of things that was revealed about, like, for instance, like Trump telling she behind closed doors that he was okay with the camps that were being created to the internment camps about Uyghur Muslims, like stuff that's like of his extreme historical importance in that book. Yep. And I'm not saying I pirated it, but I didn't pay for it. And and because it was important that I read that book, but I didn't want to support John Bolton either, because he, didn't end up like bringing forth a lot of this information beforehand when I think he should have. Oh, he also should have been, made to testify, but whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I want to make a distinction between things that you need or would make your life detrimentally worse, like people who continue to subscribe to Amazon Prime, right? Like the alternative is maybe significantly worse to your life that you can't afford as much things at like a lower cost. Just as an example, that it would be detrimental for you, significantly so, to stop using Amazon and stop supporting Amazon. Like entertainment, I think you can go without supporting, probably.
I don't know. Some pieces of entertainment, I mean, it depends on the type of entertainment, can be really like, I know at least for some movies that shit gets me up in the morning. Like, for especially like I'm a big Cape shit fan. Like I'm counting the days until like Schneider cut the Batman movie, Green Lantern TV shows, stuff like I'm counting the days. So I mean, it really does depend on the type of things, the type of media that you want to enjoy. Yeah.
I would also like to call out all of the fake fans on TikTok that are trying to cancel Eminem over his use of the F slur. If they were real fans of Eminem, they'd probably be trying to cancel him over the song Kim, which is literally just a 3-minute song of him murdering his ex-girlfriend and hiding her body in a trunk.
Oh God.
Which is an extremely violent song. If you haven't listened to it before, it'll blow your fucking mind. That would not make the cut today. If that was released in 2021, but
so yeah, do we only do this for like
exes, yes,
individuals within art, or like are we worried about inventors who maybe did something wrong? Are we worried about like we probably should take this all the way to like slave labor in other countries, things like that, but we don't, right?
I think the distinction that Denims made is important. There's a difference between recreational enjoyment of art versus consumption of like goods and services to survive, right? Like I think we can recognize the distinction between these two things, where it's usually much easier to choose to enjoy a different piece of art rather than choosing to buy more expensive clothes from something that's ethically sourced, right?
Yeah, because the amount of harm done, like for example, let's say that the person who like invented penicillin was like I don't know, like homophobic. The amount of harm that is done by us consuming penicillin by maybe adding to that guy's legacy of lives saved is not nearly as bad as if we just let all those people die by not giving them penicillin.
Yeah.
Ahrelevant, you said you had something you wanted to add in earlier.
Yeah. So something that I just kind of wanted to bring up, but like, I want to be careful with. Something I wanted to bring up, but I really wanted to be careful with, is something that kind of Destiny touched on a little bit earlier, which was rap can be very, very homophobic. And I think that it's actually pretty important to recognize that, like, the context of why rap was, in my opinion, more homophobic than like potentially some other genres might have been. And I'm actually curious as to whether or not that might change people's opinion of the use of the F word in like rap as not being as bad as like, I don't know, some person just casually dropping it. And the reason why I think this is an important, or at least something worth talking about, is I think a lot of like homophobia and stuff like that stemming from rap stems primarily from the necessity for a lot of the people that engage in rap to be hyper masculine, to have survived, to be able to tell their stories through that medium. So in a lot of the circumstances that people who artists who produce rap have to endure very, very bad and troubling environments, where in which hypermasculinity is like one of the only ways to be able to survive effectively. And one of the core tenets of hypermasculinity is homophobia. And so I think it's kind of a translation of how their lives is, because that's really what a lot of rap is. So like when people say, you know, why do rap artists constantly talk about like gang banging or stuff like that? It's because that's the life that they lived, right? That's their lived experience. And the same thing would actually go, I would argue, for the F slur, not to say that it's justified to use, but that the context is that you need to do things like that, to say things like that, to posture like that in many of these environments, to be able to have people not fuck with you and not potentially kill you or rob you or do things like that. And that's kind of informed more in the context of like these environments, I would say, than just some random person just saying the F word because they don't like gay people. And so I don't know. I think that's a worthwhile thought.
So we're only comparing this to the Black community, right? Like not hyper masculinity within all communities.
Well, it would be more specifically impoverished people.
Where you find it
who,
necessary.
Yeah, in high violence areas. Hypermasculinity seems to be ever present in these areas, and a core tenet of that is homophobia. So yeah, I would say that that's something that's worth bringing up, that these people are not just saying the F word just entirely to be homophobic and that's the end all be all, but that homophobia stems from a lived experience that they're pushed into as a result of their circumstances, their environment.
So is the question, do we continue to cancel them even though we understand that this comes from a
well, I mean,
experience?
Sure, kind of. I would just say that we should just keep that in mind. Not necessarily saying that that makes the use any like less hurtful or harmful, but rather that, you know, this kind of idea, these words, the way that these people interact with society is in many cases pushed onto them by their environment. Not necessarily them just actively, like, with all infinite resources deciding to be this way, but rather they were pushed into a way of thinking or what have you. Obviously, this is going to be less prevalent for Eminem, somebody who, while he may have been impoverished earlier in his life, is definitely far from it right now. So, you know, but...
I do want to bring up the fact that Dr. Seuss books are now flying off the shelves. This feels a lot like when you know, people say like, we're gonna ban all the guns, they're gonna ban all of our guns, and then like the guns just fly off the shelves. All this has done is like, I don't know, give the estate of his family like a ton of money, and that's it. Like I don't see. I guess there's like a social conversation come out of it, but like the Seuss family is probably loving this.
Yeah. When Natalie was canceled, she got the most Patreon supporters out of any time in her career. Even recently, when I was like more controversial, I probably got more support financially off of social media than I'd ever had before, right? Like, you know,
Sure.
we like to think that, you know, like these often do end up having that effect, is like people who are very supportive of that person end up coming out and just like throwing their support in whatever way they see fit at the party that they see being attacked. So in this case, Eminem, Dr. Seuss, so on.
Riley, don't you think it's a little messed up that you just had to have a bad debate to get all that support, and I had to lose my home? Don't you think that's a little messed up?
No, yeah, no, listen, it's all fucked. It's completely fucked. This is not, what I just described is not a good system in the slightest. It's not whatsoever. All right. But yeah, no, just like kind of relating, you know, it's weird because we think of cancel culture as like having this like super negative effect. And mind you, also, I'm going to caveat this to say that like there is still a negative effect. Like people who end up going through this, like I don't know Dr. Seuss fucking personally. I don't know Eminem personally, but like these things often do affect people personally. And like the money, I mean, like, you know, it can help, but like ultimately it can be like there is a personal incurred effect on the person, right? And so like I don't want to say that it's it's amazing, like people get all this money and whatnot, right? But like there is like a harm that they do incur as the result of the canceling.
And I think
I'm only giving that as a caveat to say that like there's a lot of good that comes from it, there's a lot of bad that comes from it. It's a messy situation.
there are also people that don't bounce back either. Like it just depends. I think it's more context to that. Like Milo Yiannopoulos never survived his canceling. Like that guy pretty much disappeared off the face of the earth. I'm pretty sure the Dixie Chicks pretty much got completely screwed after they got canceled over their Bush comments. Like they lost their whole fan base or whatever. So like there are times when people get canceled and then like they kind of get completely screwed over it. It's probably a little bit more contextual. Sometimes it's not the worst. Sometimes it's really bad. I think, yeah.
Okay, we'll move on to the second topic. So, the question is, what do you guys want to see within Twitch politics? Like, it's a fairly new area. I'm brand new here. I think I've been here for like a month and a half, maybe 2 months. I like what I see with lots of people and the way that they use their platforms. Destiny's been trying to like actually use his platform to interact with real change within legislation. I want to know, is that the direction that you guys hope all big streamers go in? Is there more to do with your platform than just argue and convince people or de-radicalize people or yell at people? Like what is it that you guys want to see done with these platforms? And I guess we'll start with you, Destiny.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be cool to see people driven more towards like local action is probably more helpful. I don't think that'll ever happen, but I think that would probably be the most positive way to utilize the platform. And then the second step would be to engage in like more fact-based, healthy conversations related to politics. So like doing actual research on policy. So kind of like how Riley does her huge briefs or whatever and her research or whatever, or I guess like my research streams, or when Dylan talks about foreign policy or any other like research. I can't think of any other specific examples of what I'm saying. Like that kind of like really heavily like research driven stuff I think is usually really positive. It'd be cool to see that over just like the shout fest or the scream fest or the drinking off the Twitter headlines. I think would be cool.
It's complicated because I think there's a balance here where we want to kind of use this to put it towards more positive action. But we also know that if I went on stream, I was like, hey guys, I'm going to stream my local environmental board meeting today and learn about the mechanism. I'm going to get like a viewer, and that one viewer is going to be like me. Nobody's going to want to tune in. So you have to find a balance to try to still bring in viewers or bring people from outside the Twitch political community in here by maybe like having more gaming streams or trying to do stuff that's more appealing to a wider audience. To try to drag them in, while also trying to then filter those people eventually into local action, which is complicated because you want to keep the same flashy appeal of Twitch, because we need to make politics more like Twitch and Twitch less like politics if we're going to really appeal to these people. But then also, how do you translate that kind of flashy show tuney type performative type stuff you're going to do for your audience into real action? How are you going to turn that into them actually getting off their ass to do stuff?
Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah. I mean, like, I'll piggyback off that. I mean, like, just going off of Dylan's last comment, like kind of breaking out and like having more gaming streams and more like making politics a much more accessible thing. It's actually really interesting because like I do really enjoy doing the research. Like I've actually like thoroughly enjoyed that, and I feel like a lot of good stuff has come from that because like a lot of that has informed like even testimony I've given in front of like the Maryland Congress. But like some of the coolest conversations I've had on here have been when I've been streaming out of not the just talking category, which most people do, but out of the Elder Scrolls Online category. And I love this. All right. I'll be the #1 ESO streamer. But it's really cool because I've actually had a lot of people who have come into my community who are normally not associated with politics whatsoever, who just come because like I'm decently good at this game. And then they end up coming on the stream and I end up talking to some people. And I still think my favorite conversation I've had on my channel so far has been with a conservative trans guy Trump supporter around the election. And mind you, like I think that this person, like that conversation was more representative of the average Trump supporter than like any of the people that you end up seeing like blasted in a lot of like explicitly conservative like online spaces, right? Mm-hmm. Because essentially the whole reason that person supported Trump was because he grew up in a relatively conservative background, never lived in a major city, never was exposed to any other, like literally the only politicians he was aware of was Biden and Trump.
Yeah.
And he, like, I asked him if he had heard, all right, well, have you heard of Bernie? And it was like, oh, I think I've heard of Bernie once, but like, I don't know that much. Like, literally knew nothing about politics, right? Just cared about video games. And like, there's probably a ton of fucking people out there, you know? So being able to like broaden ourselves and being able to expand and talk to more people who just like literally don't know anything is probably going to be a good way to reach like the vast majority of people who voted the way that they did in the election.
I think that people like forget that there's like a huge disconnect sometimes between like what online people think about politics or people that work in politics think about politics versus just like the average voter. Like especially when we're on like Twitch and YouTube and we're like so mired in like kind of like the ultra screaming at each other debate culture where everybody's obsessed like trying to put 10 kills on the board right now in order to like fuck over like debate opponents and shit rather than actually communicating with people or trying to understand or trying to like understand like you know, what other like local people think about certain issues, I think is a huge problem that we have for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of times where I'm trying to like talk to people, and it feels like a lot of people would like, we had this debate 3 years ago. Why are we still talking about it? Right? When we bring in new people, where people think like, wait, we had this debate about like whiteness, or we had this conversation about safe spaces, or we had this conversation about healthcare like 3 years ago, or like Contra released this video like so long ago. Why is this still a topic when 90% of the public haven't like heard this? Like, a big best example on the world that I always give is trans issues, where I would say like the majority of people in the online political space have heard like a lot of arguments about trans issues. 90% of the American public don't really understand like the bare basics of like trans issues, 80 to 90%. And so when I think a lot of times like the way we like sift ourselves off from like having those difficult conversations a lot of times, or open up to like take those contradictory views, bring them into the community and try to have that conversation so people who take that position can have themselves represented and then see their own ideas kind of shot down. I think that's important because we kind of like just assume after interacting with so many other people in this space who think similarly that the wider public thinks that way, which is not the case whatsoever. We are a very insulated community on Twitch.
Yeah, I mean, that for me, that's been like a huge difference is I don't know any trans people in my real life. And interacting on YouTube, on Facebook, I don't think I've ever met any. As soon as I'm on Twitch, man, I guess within like a couple of days, I probably met 10 trans people, and I was learning like some of the rhetoric that I was using was incorrect or even toxic. Like I had to reframe like a lot of the ways that I thought I was explaining these things to my audience. It's a really cool space, but one of the things is that like some people will say like, why can't everybody just be normal and just like know all of this stuff? And I think the constant thing that I keep thinking is like, well, we're probably the ones that aren't normal though, right? Like we're the ones who actually push this stuff on ourselves, that we actually dig into it consistently, that we're the ones like researching it and spending a lot of time online, and like normal people aren't doing all of that.
Aren't 1,000,000% plugged in and like playing video games and doing politics. Like you might have a guy that you're talking to that just wiped out Tomato Town that's coming on to like have some massive debate over like some huge equity issue or whatever. Like, yeah, I think that like the environment that exists online is going to be way different than the type of people that engage with politics in real life.
Destiny, you really have that song stuck in your head, don't you? You just can't get it out. You're constantly with Tomato Town, man.
Just sitting there on top of my ring.
But top of your wrinkle. But the thing is, I was learning in class recently about like the idea of early adapters before, and you have to get over this little hump before the rest of society starts to jump onto something. You have to get like 30 to 35% of society jumping on something before like you actually start to see that change. And I think that usually happens with markets, like when you like move to new products and people like accepting things like for example, like a phone with this type of screen instead of like one you plug into like the wall and you have to call out of. We are the early adapters when it comes to a lot of these ideas, and I think a lot of us don't realize we're the early adapters, that we're the people who like are really, really, really ahead of the curve when it comes to these issues, and it's kind of like our job to try to like aggressively push these ideas outward and try to bring people like inward towards that, to either become early adapters or try to get people down the line to like jump onto this, which is going to take a lot of interaction outside the community, which is why it's so important to either get other people from outside of Twitch politics and other Twitch communities into the space, we go into their spaces, or we go outside of Twitch. That's the three options.
Or unironically bringing politics into people's video games.
True. Sometimes.
Ahrelevant?
What do we think?
Sorry. Go ahead.
Ahrelevant, you got anything on this one?
Nope. I'm good. So far.
Denims?
I was thinking about this earlier. If no one else has a comment, I wanted to bring
Very
up or sorry, Denim, if you have something, I don't want to interrupt you.
No, go for it.
Here's something that I do worry about. Okay, and it actually relates kind of to this panel, and like a little bit of like, for example, some of the ways that the panel is played out. So like for example, rent control. We literally moved on from that in the first 5 minutes. Now I know that there are arguments for rent control. All right, I know that there exists people out there who argue for them. The problem is that like when we do these kind of panels and you have a lot of people on those panels who end up having the same opinions, then you end up creating sort of an echo chamber in certain regards. Sometimes that can be good because, you know, sometimes you're talking about things which have like more, I don't know, more correct. And that's always going to be like a little bit subjective. So, you know, you want to be able to do as much research as you can to be able to back up your opinions. But I mean, like, normally when people watch these kind of panels, they aren't watching necessarily a lot of people come in to agree with each other. A lot of people probably watch these panels because they want to see blood sports. And so like, to me, one thing that I worry about with Twitch politics going forward is that there's almost a necessity to have an opposition in there, even if it's just to be like kind of thrown against or battle against. Like I think about Dylan's panels, like I can actually appreciate in a weird way some of the people that you bring on there, because like some of them have deplorable opinions, but now it's like, because like we naturally, like a lot of people naturally watch politics because they want to look for that kind of conflict, or like they're specifically looking for like blood sports or something similar. We've essentially made people with bad political views almost essential to the platform, right? Like we almost cannot do the content that we want to that would perform the best and reach the most people without them.
Mhm.
Now maybe there are other ways to be able to get creative, right? And I'm constantly thinking of ways to be creative about it. But like that's one thing that I noticed that is very concerning to me going forward, is that like if we want to have like essentially like the highest performing content from what I've seen has been the content which has like the most drama. Usually the most drama like driven content has like differencing of opinions in the political space, like in political spaces, like usually that's what drives people apart. And so in order to be able to have the highest performing content, you need to have other people with bad political opinions. Like it almost becomes essential.
I mean,
Well,
I
I think
think
we say bad political opinions, but I think one of the big problems is we're so. This is just like a microcosm of like the greater political scene in the world, I guess, is that we're so ideologically pure that I think that the politics space on Twitch kind of started off as being left leaning, and like it seems like every conservative viewpoint necessarily just got completely and totally excised off the platform or never even got a chance to grow here, which is kind of annoying because all you have are like different flavors of like leftists. So then all it is like lefty infighting because there's no real like. I'm super curious. Besides like Lecture Fan, is there any other conservative on this platform that like regularly?
I mean, like,
there's
I'm aware of them.
CTV. There's
CTV is definitely probably the other one that's starting to get established now. He's getting more like 30 to 40, but that's like, again, it's not like that's nothing.
Red-
compared to a lot of
Is
regular-
John Burke a conservative?
John Burke
He's a
is
libertarian, I think.
libertarian, but
But like in terms of like regularly streaming people, it like 99, well maybe not, but like 95%, or actually no, 99% of the viewership is going towards like pretty left-leaning channels. So like that's also kind of annoying as well. Like anytime you stoke out like disagreement, it's either going to be over something like incredibly personal or over some like really crazy purity testing. There's not really much room to argue back and forth over particular topics, because there's like, I don't want to say there's like a circle jerk, but there's a big like ideological consistency between most of the streamers that do politics on Twitch.
this is the main reason why I started Hippy Dippy, because I didn't think people were like confronting because the fact was we were having that, and I will call it a circle jerk, when the president of the United States was Donald Trump, right? We were not confronting the ideas or confronting the opinions that were the literal president of the United States and the majority in the Senate's opinions. And we weren't confronting them. We were confronting things that are way down the line that, like, I would say 90% of the Americans aren't even talking about, which kind of angered me, because not that I don't want to talk about those ideas and get to there eventually, but we got to take this step before we take that step. We're not even close to that step. And a big problem I've had producing the show is the fact that a lot of conservatives, and I've dealt with this today, there was a little hubbub today about it, feel like with these shows that they're brought on to get shat on and then like disposed afterwards. You know, that's the whole like circle of conservative Twitch. And I'm trying to look for a way to make them feel less like that, so we can actually have more long-term like stability in actually having these conversations. But it's difficult to have any birth of that, and when you, it is very few and far between. The only person I can think of as of recent, there's two people, Rob Noor possibly, but he also streams on YouTube. But the one I can really think of is CTV, and that's not a lot considering how long I've been doing my shows for people to be really established. I've seen a lot of conservative streamers come and go. Brento Box, Operation Madman, a lot of people like you probably don't even know of. So it's, I don't know, it's a difficult format, but I think it's necessary, and people definitely flock to Hippy Dippy over like, say, just like a show of like 10 lefties who agree on 90% of things, but then are going to kill each other over ML or syndicalism, whatever the hell. Yeah, so I mean, it's aggravating because I think this is one of the better ways to translate to communities wider, because I can say that my Hippy Dippy Roundtables get some of the most diverse viewership I've ever seen. I mean, people that like people in their like 50s and 60s, like in my YouTube comment sections, that I'm just blown away that are actually engaging with my content.
Yeah, I mean, to what Riley was saying, I think that like having the bad opinions isn't just there for content, but it's also necessary to like arm everybody else with the right arguments against those things. Let them actually hear lots of those so that they, when they do encounter them, they're not convinced by them so easily. But I've been doing panels for a while, and when I got on the Twitch, it just seemed as though there was like this void where like everything was just blood sports, and that's why like I tried doing this instead. And we had an all right-wing panel a couple weeks ago with most of those people on there, and it like the chat the entire time was like, you know, this is cringe, like this is ridiculous. There were lots of people who were saying like, don't platform right-wingers, like don't bring a bunch of people on to have an echo chamber about, you know, conservative issues. I'm like, but that's what you guys do all the time. Like, why why can't they do it too? Like, that's kind of ridiculous. Like, that is the idea, is that like right-wingers shouldn't even be platformed on a lot of these things. And lots of people I know specifically say like, no, I'm not going to go on the show if there's right-wingers on there.
Yeah, but I mean, I think a lot of that is due to how like ideologically pure people on the left get on the internet. Like, fuck, it's not even right wing. It's like if you're liberal, they basically just call you a fascist. So even people that are like left leaning are considered fascist. So of course, if you have like an actual authentic conservative, they're like way past the plat. Like it's basically like a direct descendant of Hitler. If it's somebody that identifies as a Republican, which makes like the integration of those people in any of these spaces basically fucking impossible.
Yeah,
so.
and even and the thing is, I still have a lot of people who will message me like, I can't believe you had this person on because they had this take or that take or this take or this thing, or I can't believe, I'll get that constantly. And some of it's like legitimate concerns because we are so desperate for conservatives, a lot of times we'll just grab onto whatever conservative, and it could actually be conservative with actually reprehensible views, right? Because we're just so desperate to get any conservative on. I had that problem really early on with my show when I was just literally looking for anybody. But now a lot of it just feels like people who just, their problem isn't that it's a conservative that they don't like, it's just the fact that they're conservative, period. And they're not really willing to engage with these ideas because we're giving them a certain amount of respect by allowing them to speak. But since those types of people are in the space, and those types of people in my chat, and the type of combative nature of a lot of these panels, and the fact that like I don't moderate niceness, it makes these people, conservatives who are walking in this environment, not want to come back. And that is an issue I have to figure out how to deal with if I want this show to continue, because I'm getting a shorter and shorter list of conservatives. I had to make a special show specifically for recruitment just so I could keep up on a decent list of guests. And that's why if you look at my show, it'll be like Hutch, Trihex, Destiny, RGR, and then the other side it'll be like Guns Are Cool 99 with 2 viewers, right? It's like it's the there's just a huge like dip when it comes to like amount of influence and reach, and it's a bummer. It's not that I don't want to help those people like, you know, get established in the space. It just shows that there are no established creators in the space, and the few that are, like Lecture Fan, barely ever actually make panel appearances.
Yeah, I mean, for me, coming onto Twitch, almost my entire right-leaning audience has disappeared. almost all of them. Like
Mhm.
I started off on Facebook, then went to YouTube, and then went to Twitch, and now I stream on all three. But it's easily my farthest right-leaning audience is on Facebook. My like kind of moderate audience or a mixture is on YouTube, and then by far my farthest left-leaning audience is on Twitch. And that seems to be like how everybody congregates on the internet for content.
Mhm.
I mean, all right, like I understand a lot of this. I guess I don't know. Maybe this is too hot of a take. I'm just wondering why. Like a lot of people are trying to say that like are essentially implying that it's a virtue it is an aspirable goal to try and create a space for like a lot of the people who have these types of political views online. But I mean, like I don't know. We talked about CTV. CTV, for example, a lot of people or people who ended up seeing he had, for example, a debate with another trans YouTuber, Twitch streamer, about essentially trans people in a variety of ways, and literally made the argument that, or like analogized trans people to dinosaurs. And I think that something close to the exact quote was calling trans people like abominations or monstrosities or something, or some variation thereof. Instead of actually like recognizing how terrible that was after the fact, he's actually gone on and like if you look at his stream, the last time I checked, he actually has like an emote and an infographic on his Twitch stream that's like a dinosaur with trans colors, right? That's not a degree of introspection. That's like rubbing salt in the wound, you know? Like it's hard for me to look at people like this and be like, okay, yeah, that's totally a political ideology that deserves to be platformed. Like my inclination is to be like, no, that's fucked up. You know, like if you have a political ideology that where those kind of views are intrinsic to that kind of belief, then it's like it's hard for me to see the merit of wanting to include you in the space.
So I hosted that conversation actually, so I do remember this a little bit. I don't remember the word monstrosity being used. I don't remember abomination. The exact word or quote, it was like he went into like a long spiel about what exactly the dinosaurs from Jurassic Park was, and his argument was that they're not actually dinosaurs, they're genetically mutated or reptiles or frogs of some sort. And he tried to in some manner say that he was making the argument that trans women are a third category, which is different than just women or man, and that's the stance I believe he still holds to this day, is that there's a separate third category. And it's not really an argument that I completely understand. But I don't remember abomination being said.
I mean,
but
do you think it's that benign when he like literally you can go onto a stream right now and he has like a trans colored dinosaur like that does not come across as like a super nuanced
because he got a lot of shit from it. Obviously, Vadim Newquest, also known as Creationist Cat, picked up a clip of it and it like spread on Twitter, and like obviously he got a lot of attention from it. So he basically like took the moment to like make a like trans dino emote and a trans dino this and that. And because that's what he took the moment for.
It's not, well, I mean, like that doesn't like that may explain it. That doesn't excuse the behavior though, right? Like that, like in that case, he could have had like a moment of like introspection and realized, oh shit, I kind of fucked up here. But he kind of like doubled down and actually like dug his feet in further.
Well,
like,
yeah, because he thinks that it's a legitimate argument.
Yeah, I think with lots of right wingers, it seems like the option is either they're like somewhat right or they're just completely wrong. And I think like somewhat right in leading their audiences in a somewhat right direction where I guess trans people are able to get along better within society when they're around these people is probably better than nothing at all. I don't think that like excluding him altogether is the answer, because like sometimes people are wrong about some things and can have like a good platform outside of that. And I'm not saying that that's CTV. I'm just saying that like I don't think that excluding them just because they're somewhat wrong, and though I'm sure it's offensive, and I'm sure for somebody like you it's not fun to see.
Yeah, I mean, like it's kind of it's attacking my humanity, right? I mean, I don't know what you like it's pretty direct. Like, I mean, like I don't know, we wouldn't accept this kind of argument for like any other category, I don't think, right? Like it's hard for me to see like a similar analogy, like, you know, like black people are sometimes compared to like pit bulls in like race realist arguments, right? Like if he did a similar thing there and he had like a race realist argument and then he went on and he had like a pit bull on his home screen and he was like, oh no, I just genuinely believe in the argument, like we wouldn't accept that, right? like we would look at that and be like, no, that's absolutely deplorable. But I don't know. It seems really weird that we're
this is the thing is I'm not trying to excuse it as like this is an okay, like this is a legitimate argument. Like if you look at the live clip, you can see me. I look quite confused at the whole because I'm genuinely confused of why he's talking about Jurassic Park. And this is the situation like I'm in with this too, because I remember there's a whole, and I have to bring this up, but I have to confront it eventually because it's just becoming a bigger problem. So there was this thing where where somebody asked me, and it's becoming a bigger thing as of recent because like Endernax keeps like bringing it up, where I said privately that like when somebody asked me, I said I believe like that like CTV has like transphobic beliefs, right? And then like that was brought up, and basically like there was this huge thing, and eventually it got made public, right? And then I was confronted on it publicly, and like I wasn't going to change what I genuinely thought about it for like niceness, to keep cordiality about it. I wasn't going to lie about it. And I said, yes, I do believe that he has transphobic beliefs. And this has gotten me a lot of heat with a lot of my conservative panel guests that I said that. And so currently there is one conservative guest who is trying to make it so no conservative will ever go on my show again because I crossed the line and backstabbed him. And so now I'm looking at a situation where like the entirety of my show is getting undermined because I said what I honestly believed, but then again, I have provided, in my opinion, what are the most fair and open spaces for conservatives on the platform so they could actually engage with people on the other side. And am I supposed to just pretend I don't have any beliefs or say or just filter myself in? And that was something that was made public. I wanted to make it a private affair. It was something that I said privately, and I tried to deal with the whole situation privately, but now it's a whole public affair. It was dragged to the public. So it's just there's no way for me to win here currently, really.
Yeah, I think the thing that sucks is that like because of how kind of like left online spaces are, the conversations that we end up having are so far removed. Like the Overton window of our platform is so far left compared to the Overton window of the average American or even the average like Western or worldwide platform in terms of issues we can discuss. Like if we want to discuss trans issues on Twitch, like we're going to be off in the world of like, like, do we think like trans people should start beta blockers when they're prepubescent, or like we're going to be like in a very, 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 very left leaning, very, very, very progressive space when we're having a discussion on these trans issues. But like the average American trans discussion is like, I don't know if trans people are real. Like I think those are just cross dressers. Like a lot of people don't even have the vocabulary to even begin to discuss those issues. And I think like I'm using trans issues here, but I think that's true of almost every at least social issue. Like the conversations that happen on this platform, the window in which like the left and quote unquote right views of those is so far over compared to like where the average like Western person is in those conversations. It makes it really hard to integrate any newer people into it that aren't already very far left.
I never said this publicly, but I mean, I've even considered just shutting down the whole Hippy Dippy Roundtable because it's becoming more like effort than it's worth. Legitimately, where it is a thing where I'm constantly dealing with drama. I'm constantly managing these people. I'm putting in 90 to 95% of the work to do this, and people are like, well, you're just making money off of us, or you're just doing this off of us, and you're not truly appreciate your panel guests. And all they have to do is literally show up. Like I don't do 90 to 95% of the work. If you see like the amount of like views or whatever I get is like much better than I usually get on my normal streams. So it's if everybody could do it to get those types of views, everybody would. But obviously it takes an amount of making connections and organizing and moderation skills, and not everybody can do it. And the effort is just starting to, it's just starting to build like the amount of pressure is starting to build up. But now with my current situation, if I wanted to stop it, could I? Am I in a financial state right now where I could just cut off my most popular show on my own? No, I'm not. So now I feel also, even if I wanted to shut it down, I'm in a state where I couldn't if I wanted to. So I don't know. The whole. So yeah, it's completely toxic, and I'm starting to hate making the whole show together.
No, I mean like I don't want to put it like that. Like I think that it's like there are positives and negatives, right? Like the positive, like when I brought kind of this line of dialogue to begin with, right? Like it does drive a lot of viewership. It brings a lot of people to the conversation. Like those are good things it does, right? In the ways that, a lot of other like when I do like research streams, right? I probably get like maybe average, like sometimes I'll get like 30 to like maybe maximum 100 viewers for that, right? Like people, for as much to my dismay, are not very interested in that, right? And so like it is a good way to be able to bring people to the table. The problem is like I guess that I'm just trying to figure out the ethical way to handle it, where essentially like pursuant to what you brought up earlier, you know, like there's like a tacit acknowledgement that like you coming out and literally just acknowledging what I think is like a pretty easy sell for a lot of people, or maybe that's just me. I don't know. Maybe the Overton window is so far removed that it's not an easy sell to a lot of people. To me, it's an easy sell that like those are blatantly transphobic statements. And like for you to get that much pushback for saying something which seems just like pretty matter of fact to me, like it really, like I'm just trying to figure out like how to do what you're doing when half of your panelists have like a view that it seems really hard for me to reconcile with like being a good faith actor.
So,
you know?
So I would like to say that I when I design these shows, I don't do it just like here's 4 conservatives, here's 4 lefties, and throw them on a show. It might seem like that, but it isn't. I specifically get people on and then look at other people and like see if I think these people would deal with each other in an effective manner, right? Where I'm like, if I get somebody on who I think is going to be like a really fast talker and is going to say something, let's say in favor of rent control, for example, then I'm going to get somebody who I know is also a very fast talker, somebody who can combat that and is against rent control. And I try to, it's like matching up Pokemons, right? It's not just throwing a bunch of people in a ring. It takes a lot more effort than people think. I have like a whole Google sheet where everybody's ever been on my show has a spice meter from 0 to like for like the maximum level, and like the spice meter actually like impacts on like how I match people up and stuff. It's so a lot of time and effort goes into it, and so I just if I was to bring somebody that had on a view that I found reprehensible or possibly dangerous to spread, I would always be careful to make sure that I had somebody in the room who knows how to deal with that and is comfortable dealing with it, because I know a lot of people don't want to debate the topics that could be extremely personal for them. For example, if I wouldn't want to go on a stream with somebody who's like people who use drugs, people who someone who supported Duterte, the person who's like literally just killed drug addicts. I couldn't do it because how much that would personally like just be too much of a difficult conversation for me to have. So I would get somebody who also is willing and able, and I make very clear to them the type of conversation that's going to be. And so when we talk about that one CTV conversation, Tiffany, who was the person who was actually talking to him there, I explained it to him beforehand. I explained what type of conversation would be, and they were 100% on board and ready for it. So that's another thing. I also have to like brief people on what type of conversations are on. There's a lot of effort that goes into like matching these up responsibly that a lot of people don't do on their panel shows. A lot of people don't give people the topics 3 to 4 to 5 days in advance. A lot of people give it 1 day in advance or the day of. And I personally never thought that was responsible. A lot of people don't match it up like that. There's a lot of things that panel shows do that I've tried my best to like move it away from. That it's, I don't know. I'm just rambling about my own shit right now. I feel like I'm just promoting. So I should stop.
Well,
No, you're
also,
fine. You're kind of at the center of this, right?
Yeah, I mean, your show's a big part of it, like especially when we're
Mhm.
talking about the direction that Twitch is moving, and you're one of the newer content creators, and you're growing at a fast rate, and you're somebody that would, especially younger, you're somebody who would help lead, towards whatever direction it is that we're going in, right?
Maybe. I mean, I'm 20 now, so I'm pretty old.
So I just
Okay, dude. Okay, dude.
20 and a half.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What am I? I'm 20 fucking 4, dude. What am I supposed to do? Yeah, like, come on, man. You're killing me out here.
hey, right there with you. What's up?
Hey, there you go.
Also, I think more importantly, you have your policy on like using the word bitch, for example, or the other words that you have. Like, I think that's really important. I think if you just like bring on conservatism and you're like, you can use any slurs you want, you know what I mean? Like maybe save the N word because that one would get you banned. And you're just like allowing someone to like unironically just harass someone. I think that that's a severe problem. I think that I unironically think that one of your panels are one of the best panels out there because it's really obvious that you put a lot of time into it. You prepare the topics ahead of time. You prepare questions ahead of time. Mm-hmm. You're like ready for dead space when it comes up. And the matching always shows in the Hippy Dippy podcast. It never feels like one side is way, way, way too strong than the other side.
Yeah. Like for instance, the Vosh v. Bastia thing just kind of lined up perfectly. And I was very careful to see like how these people would go against each other and like match against each other rhetorically. But when it comes to the show and the banning of words, I specifically did that because there are instances that happen on the show that I see that I'm uncomfortable with, and I end up banning them. And that was not a popular decision. I lost guests who could not come on my show without saying those words. Personally, I think you should have enough of a filter to not call every woman you see probably a bitch. I think you need to work on that. But there are certain guests, and there's some guests that don't break any of the rules, but are just so bombastic or so out there or so unable to like just talk to other people that I end up not even allowing them really on roundtable formats anymore because they just can't do it and have it be a good show. And so, yeah, and so when you add all the fact that I already have a shortage of people from a certain community, and then I have to add all these filters, some of which make them uncomfortable, that's a problem. And you want to know, here's the other issue, is that if I ever, like, anytime I listen to their concerns or I mute somebody on the other side, because there's certain instances we can all think of on my show where I've muted people before that people get angry at, and there's a whole thing about it. Then people like Dylan is just coping for the right because Dylan wants to get the money and Dylan wants to grift or Dylan wants to do this. But I'm just trying to literally add that balance. No matter what, I'm going to walk away from some roundtable with somebody angry that I enforced some rule against one person, but they don't think I enforced a rule against the other person. It is impossible. So that's why I'm like, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, this is too much. It's too much effort. It's not enough.
It's really, really hard. Yeah, everything that you're going through right now is actually Austin did this a lot when he did. People remember the Raj Royale. The problem with the reason why these formats are unsustainable is because you have to match. Dylan is basically getting at this. You not only have to match ideologically opposed people, you have to match ideologically opposed people of similar energy levels. So like you can get like a conservative and like a liberal, but if the conservative is way more bombastic than the liberal, it's not going to seem like an even panel. You've got to balance out like the you have to balance out like the number of people, the energy levels across all the parties. And then the hardest part for all of these is people, even though people love to watch drama, very few people actually like to be in drama. It's very, very, very fucking stressful for a lot of people. So people like to watch people like go at each other's throats in these shows, but the people that do that, they don't want to come back for that. And that was Austin's biggest problem with the Royale, is that nobody wanted to come back. Like they would have one or two really bad experiences and they'd be like, this is fucking horrible. Why the fuck would anybody want to do this? And they were like, yeah, fuck it, I can't go back, And like people that even some people view as like being hard would be like brought to tears on some of these shows and shit. They don't enjoy it. Yeah. So like running those like really combative platforms is very difficult. And
that right there is one thing. Early on, I remember there's an example, and I won't name the streamer because they don't stream anymore and there's no reason to, but they cried on the show, and I'm sitting there and nobody broke any rules, nobody broke any regulations, and so I'm slowing the panel down because I'm breaking my own regulations because I was feeling for them. But like, what do I do if I've created this environment that people want to see? Somebody wants to get on because I get like a ton of people, like smaller creators, who want to use this as an example to grow. But then they get on and they're like, "Oh wait, maybe this isn't for me." And then it's too much and they overload, and then this happens. Yeah. Like, what am I supposed to do? Because if I break the rules to help them out, then certain people are gonna be like, "Oh," who are on the other side of that interaction, can be like, "Look, Dylan, coping the system for somebody who just couldn't take it, and if I don't do it, then I'm just gonna look like a heartless bastard. There's no way to win."
Yeah, it's really hard. There's no good solution for it. Unfortunately, the people that tend to be the most suited for those environments tend to be like the most toxic people. So you need to look to like the dredges of the internet to find, like, it's going to be people that are probably like super transphobic, super homophobic, like super shitty asshole people that enjoy like those types of engagements over and over again.
And that's why when you find somebody like Bastiat, somebody who's like kind of like in the realm of kind of could go either way on some issues and has a lot of energy and could go hard, like it's like a gold mine. And when people, like, the whole system can be like destroyed by just one person just stopping streaming, because we're running on such like a tight ship now with all the new regulations we put in, because I want to increase the quality of the show if I want to get bigger streamers on, because no bigger streamer is going to want to associate with this show if it's completely and utterly toxic in all of its ability. And so that's why part of the reason why I did the whole Hippy Dippy Championship belt thing is because, like, I see that this system could collapse at any moment, and which right now I have a crisis of like people trying to stop a certain person trying to organize conservatives and never go on my show again. Which it's the same thing Tria Logic tried to do with me when she tried to stop all the conservatives coming on my show. Thankfully that time it failed, but this time maybe it won't. And so I got to diversify or do something to save the show. I have no clue, man. I'm up shit creek and I have zero paddles.
Well, and we've seen Prime go through this recently as well, where he's trying to explain that he's both trying to make it educational and very entertaining at the same time.
Those two things don't go together, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's really hard. That's why, like I said, like I felt like there was most panels focusing on the debate bro stuff, and like it's here and we've got it, and like if I did that, I would be doing the same thing as everybody else, right? And then there's like audience people who say like, I enjoy it. I don't know that I get anything out of it, but I enjoy watching it. So I'm trying to like find something where I can do something different, but I still love going on the debate bro panels and, and yelling at people.
Your best bet is you probably need to dig into the YouTube or Facebook streamer scene some and try to pull some fresh blood from there, because there are no fucking conservatives on this platform. It's just the chats here and the communities are too toxic to even deal with that. Although I understand, because a lot of conservatives have like pretty bad viewpoints, but yeah,
we're doing that. We're actually that's originally how Rob Noor was discovered, and we actually we're literally going to radio now. We're going through local radio broadcasters and finding like local conservative radio. We have dug so deep to keep this show flowing, and I mean, you got to think, and this isn't a monthly show either. I do this every single Friday, right? Which doing this, because if you look at Prime Show, right? Prime Show is never like 4v4 conservative left perfectly balanced. It's like you'll see like a mix, like it'll be like, oh, this is a neoliberal, we can kind of put them on the right. I got to do that, and I got to do that every single Friday, topics a week in advance with all these regulations, getting people. And I've been doing this consistently, and I only missed one show, and I missed that show because I had a personal family crisis. I literally went through this whole recent thing and still was able to do the Hippy Dippy Championship. So I've been trying to do this consistently because consistency is important for this show to keep going, but there's just only so many conservatives and guests in the world, It's only so many.
Yeah, I mean that we didn't seem to have trouble finding them. The problem was like we filled up a panel of 9 or 10, and there were a lot more that wanted to come on, and the problem was the reaction to having an all right-wing panel. Like my audience freaked out, or the Twitch audience freaked out. Lots of my friends were like telling me like, dude, don't even do this. This is a waste of time. Like you're just going to be platforming bad ideas everywhere. So I do feel like right wingers are pushed off the platform. And I think like Destiny, you're right. Like I've been trying to like go to other platforms to find people who want to come on, and that's how we found Phil came from Facebook. Dylan,
and then I snatched him up quick.
You did. You snatched him up quick.
He'll be on this Friday.
So yeah. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
Or can I just pose? I'm sorry. I have to think about this, right? Because like, I don't know. I want to pose like an alternative hypothetical, and I want to see how people would feel about it. All right. So the platform that we have right now is largely left leaning, and we could say that a lot of people are too left, and that has created problems of its own. All right. What if it was the same but in reverse? Would we have the same like? Do we think, because right now we're giving like a lot of consideration to let people who are not as like, to let conservative people or like considering how to be able to get conservative people onto the platform, like, do we think that conservatives would extend us that same gratitude or that same consideration?
It seems as if they do. It just seems like the lefties feel as though the right wingers are toxic and leave anyways, right?
Well, I mean, like right now, I'm just thinking.
I think stuff has changed a lot. I think it used to be the case, at least a couple of years ago, that right-leaning people seemed way more open to adverse conversations than left-leaning people would. I mean, that's kind of why I got popular, because I was one of the only left-leaning people that was actually willing to engage with right-leaning people. But I would say as of recently, that seems to have changed a bit, where right-leaning people aren't as open to conversations anymore. But that might be because a lot of them that were have just gotten banned off of everything, so you don't see them anymore. And then the only ones left are larger ones that obviously aren't going to engage in adversarial conversations, like Ben Shapiro or Steven Crowder, or any of the big Mark Dice. Like, these guys aren't going to do it because they're huge channels. They have nothing to gain and everything to lose.
Okay, I got to clarify something. When I said I do 95% of it, I meant me and my team do 95% of it. I want to make sure I give a shout out to my editor, to my dude Danabo and Mr. Geek, who I would not be able to produce a show without them. I meant 95% in comparison to the guests who literally just have to show up, and half of them never even read up on the topics I end up giving them anyway.
Damn, fuck them.
Oh my god. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. I'm just sitting here thinking like let's compare this to like national politics, right? Historically, Democratic Party, especially at federal level, usually tries to extend like the same kind of courtesy to the Republican Party. Like, basically this is a big reason why a lot of Democrats are like heavily criticized, right? Is that they're usually the party that tries to like extend the olive branch. You're like, oh hey, we'll try to work with you. Oh hey, we'll create a space for you. Oh hey, like that's literally Biden's entire platform. And it seems like every time that happens, Republicans almost never basically just like spit in that hand, right? Or like do everything that they can to like not return that good favor, you know?
I feel like this is something. I feel like this is a meme that gets spread around a lot, but I don't know if this is necessarily true. Like, it feels like if Democrats have the opportunity to secure some sort of political power, it feels like the party goes for it. And then it feels like if Republicans have the opportunity to secure some kind of political power, it feels like Republicans go for it. The idea that like Democrats are always rolling over for Republicans, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that there are some cases where you can point that out. So, for instance, I think Democrats police themselves harder. So, like, Republicans will support Roy Moore, and Democrats will kick Al Franken out of the Senate. Like, I think that like dichotomies like that are really crazy. But I think that but I also think broadly speaking, I think that like content creators and the standards that they have in terms of inviting people onto their platforms are going to be different than like what we would expect in Congress as well. And I will say that regardless of the individual creators, the audiences are all equally toxic. Like, any left-leaning audience will flame the fuck out of any right-leaning person. And even if right-leaning people are willing to talk to me, their audiences will flame the ever-living fuck out of me, and I'll see a ton of slurs and horrible shit thrown in there. So the audiences are all toxic no matter where the fuck you go.
So
I agree.
Oh, okay.
So
the thing is, like, when we were creating these spaces, I created the space because I thought it'd be number one. I thought it'd be interesting for all of us. I thought it'd be like everybody would want to see it, which obviously I guess people did want to see it. But there's also the fact that if we want to like get more people online, like, I got into this not just to talk to people who agree with me. I didn't just get into this so people, like, I could get a bunch of people who agreed with me and we could all sing Kumbaya in a semicircle. I did it because I wanted to get people who disagree with me to possibly agree with me. And there's a lot, and I would say compared to a lot of creators on Twitch who are left-wing, I have probably one of the highest amount of conservatives in my chat comparative. That's still a low percentage though. It's only ended up being like 20%, maybe 10%, which is a high percentage for left-wing creators, which just shows how little there are. And so if we want to change people's minds, we got to bring right-wingers into this space to then hopefully change their mind. Like, isn't that the whole point of what we're doing here, is to hopefully convince people that we have the best ideas?
No, that's not most people's goal, but I think that's a noble goal. But I think that most people are just interested in trying to make as much money as they can off the largest audience they can grow.
Well, I'd like money too, but I mean, I'd like both.
Or at least the larger content creator gets, seems to be like the bigger drift towards that, is you maintain whatever ideological positions are the most popular ones to have so that you can get the biggest audience possible so that you can make as much money possible. It seems to become the goal.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all relevant. Like, you want to have the best content that people are actually going to be interested in, or that's actually helpful to them so that they keep coming back so that you can keep making money. So, you know, I think it's all just as relevant as the other. We have a straw poll in the private chat. If any of you want to vote on it or post it in your chats, we'll move on to the next topic in just a second. And you guys can let me know if you guys have a preference as well. Denims, did you have anything else on this topic? Irrelevant?
Not particularly.
No, the only thing that I was thinking of is when it came to the topic as listed, the future of Twitch politics, I just, we don't really have time to get into it, but I think something pretty worth talking about is the responsibility that large content creators have for committing to and or facilitating direct action, and whether or not we should have these larger content creators whose means are far beyond what they need for themselves to perhaps push them into a position and say, yeah, you should really be doing like direct action, and whether or not we should move the culture of online politics towards that direction, or if it's simply okay for them to be entirely hands off with direct action. I think that's a conversation I really wanted to have around that idea, but definitely isn't time unless the last section
we
is
still have
on,
time.
but...
Yeah, like that was kind of my main idea when bringing up this topic, is like, how much do we expect everybody to do that? Do we want them to do this in just like, you know, local stuff with mayors or for Congress or for president? Like, do we want them trying to do this with everything? Are there other things that they can do this in with, like charities and nonprofits? Like, how much can we get everybody involved in? How much should we expect this of people with platforms? Like, how much should we consider this a responsibility now with the rate that political streamers are growing now?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just say that the more often that people do it, the more legitimized it becomes, right? Like right now, like for example, some of the stuff that Destiny did, like I'm pretty sure that nothing on such a scale has really been attempted before, and that's going to set a precedent. Like, regardless of whether or not it was successful, like that's going to set a precedent that like these kind of things can have real effects, and people will take it seriously, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I'm working for legislators at state and federal, and I talk about this with them, right? And I tell them about what's going on in online politics, and a lot of them genuinely just aren't aware of a lot of what's happening online. And like they're genuinely interested in looking to online platforms as forms of like future political advocacy, right? It's just more that a lot of them, I mean, are boomers and don't know what they're talking about or don't know what any of it is, right? To be perfectly frank about it, right? And so like, or not, but like people who aren't like super duper plugged into like online politics. And so like the more that this happens, whether it's at like a local or federal or whatever level, like the more it'll become legitimized and the more that will be taken advantage of on the platform. And it will legitimize like a lot of what we do and get us out of the realm of like political hobbyism, which is I think where a lot of us tend to perceive of us occupying most of the time.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, do more of it and lots of it, and as much as you can reasonably. Like don't break your back over it, but like you know, like whatever you're able to do.
You're muted if you're trying to talk to us, Tom.
Thank you, sir. So yeah, the straw poll has $15 minimum wage. Pretty by far the one that everybody wants us to talk about, but I feel like this is going to go into another thing where everybody just says the same thing, and then we'll move on. But if that's the case, then we'll go to the second highest voted one. Who wants to start off on $15 minimum wage?
Are we talking about whether $15 minimum wage is good or whether Biden failed the country and not trying to push for $15 minimum wage? What are we talking about?
Well, if you think it's good, then you would assume that Biden failed the country. But I guess like whether or not you think it's good, whether or not you think it's enough. I know that lots of progressives were pushing for $30 minimum wage. You know, do you think that we should do this locally instead of federally? Like, what are your takes on $15 minimum wage?
Who is pushing $30?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Delusional fucking virtue signaling dipshits on Twitter were.
So okay, Twitter. Okay, so not real life. Okay.
Yeah. I think that minimum wages should probably be set at the most local level possible. So if cities or states doing it, it probably makes more sense than the country doing it. That's my take. But
yeah, I mean, I think it's like something we could do as like more of a Band-Aid fix, but I'm much more of a. I really like the idea of like unions setting incredibly localized wages for a lot of these things. Is my opinion. I really like the idea of more unionized or as focused as possible. I just feel like unions would do it, you know, pretty much business to business. It's pretty much as localized as you can get it, what have you. But I recognize that we're not going to unionize overnight. So,
well, when I was doing stuff with 1199 SEIU, I was a huge proponent of $15 minimum wage, and when I was in the General Assembly in Maryland, it was actually when $15 minimum wage passed in the state of Maryland, and I saw all the kind of stuff to water it down slowly, and how eventually the idea of it ever being tied to inflation was gutted, and the amount, how long it was going to be spaced out, got further and further and further, and how certain things didn't apply to tipped workers, and eventually got through. But after it got into hell. I understand a $15 minimum wage is not perfect for a wide variety of reasons, but I don't pass legislation thinking it's going to be perfect. I understand there's going to be according to the CBO report, there's going to be people who lose their jobs. I just think in the long run, and it has to be a spaced out implementation where every year you have a little bit of an increase. If you don't do it that way, more businesses are going to lose pointlessly, go under. I think with the spaced out implementation, the net benefit would be good due to the amount of more money in the pockets of working people and them having more disposable income. And I think that could be something that jolts the economy up. And the one main thing that did scare me was this idea that it might increase inflation, but I haven't seen a single time in our nation's history where increasing the minimum wage actually led to inflation. So I think that's a silly concern.
Denims?
I think that the being upset at Biden is, I don't know. I haven't been on this bandwagon. I think it's kind of silly to be on it. maybe it's not, I don't know. I think that anyone who is against the $15 minimum wage, I'm not sure I've seen a single argument that's been against the $15 minimum wage that's been salient. It doesn't seem to actually have, there's no evidence that I've seen that shows that unemployment goes down. In fact, there's some studies that show that unemployment has gone up after increasing minimum wage in certain areas. If you want people to have a certain standard of living, a minimum wage could make sense. If people think that the minimum wage is still too low for certain cities, which is true, $15 minimum wage, for example, is very, very little in New York, even though that is the current minimum wage there. You would have a state policy that would round out those edges, right? Because obviously even if you thought a $30 minimum wage was worthwhile in a city like New York or Seattle or LA or whatever, that would not be great maybe in the Midwest or some shit. So yeah, in favor of $15?
Yeah, Riley.
I don't know. I don't want to say too much because I'm not as strong as like a lot of economic arguments, and I'm trying to learn more. It sounds like a pretty decent argument. I'm not sure how it's going to be able to pan out. I'm not sure if people have been following. I assume people have been following what's been happening with the COVID Relief Act and the recent decision from, I think it was the Senate Secretariat, that it wouldn't be includable, and how Ilhan Omar and a bunch of other people are calling for her to be fired now. I mean, like, this isn't necessarily related. It just seems like if it is an idea that we want to be able to implement, and we're talking about implementing as quickly as possible, from what I understand, a budget reconciliation, the COVID relief package might not be the best way to be able to accomplish it if we have to use budget reconciliation, because as my understanding of her ruling was, it's just something that logistically wasn't able to be done through the process. And people are trying to take out the fact that she came to like an accurate judgment or ruling out on her personally.
Something that I agree 100%. Just on that, something that's really fucking annoying to me is for all the memes of calling other people like fascists and blah blah blah. I really don't like the idea that like we need to bend towards like totalitarianism and start eradicating sections of the government if they're not doing what we like. Like if 15 an hour minimum wage is really important, then the fight for that is during the midterms and the on-season elections. Like you need to get more than the razorist, thinnest fucking margin you possibly can in the Senate if you want to pass stuff like this. Okay. And the idea that like, well, we didn't get enough in the Senate, so now we need to change every fucking process we can figure out how to change. I don't know. That kind of stuff like really bothers me.
Can you let me explain quickly, because I see people like, I saw a few people like, why can't we just like bully Manchin? So the thing is, if we look at the two people, it's Cinema in Arizona, who I do think there actually might be some room to pressure her due to like how Arizona's like set up in politics, and it's more somewhat balanced. But West Virginia is the most Trumpy Trump state in the literal country. You're not going to find anything more Trump country. And we've seen Democrats in that state that we funded with our money from our party flip before. Jim Justice is the perfect example. Their governor was a Democrat who then just flipped Republican when it became a decent opportunity or when he was put in a tough spot. That's what he did. He literally switched parties after we funded his campaign and pushed him in there to get a Democrat elected in West Virginia. So Joe Manchin, whether we like it or not, holds a lot of political clout because we can't do anything without him. And if he doesn't want a $15 minimum wage, we have to expand the Senate majority if we're going to get it through. There's no Kamala, and that's not to say that the Biden administration hasn't tried to some extent to bully him. I do think there's some carrotistic approach that could be taken. Kamala did go down to his state and talked about the benefits of a $15 minimum wage. If you can get his electorate to support a $15 minimum wage, then boom, then maybe you have some leverage power. But you got to make that support much wider before you could even apply that tactic, and you would also need to make that support wider amongst Republicans in the state as well. And so I see all like people saying, well, if Biden and Kamala really cared about $15 minimum wage, they would overrule the Senate parliamentarian. Why would you do that thing that breaks precedent if it literally doesn't achieve anything without 50 votes?
Because people seem to think that breaking the parliamentarian on its own is going to somehow magically make 15 an hour work. It's not. It's not. The bill's going to die on the fucking Senate floor. And then all of the coronavirus relief, yeah, all your relief is fucking gone. And then it's this huge shit show fight. Like, if you wanted a 15 an hour minimum wage, it needed to come with a larger Senate majority. You need probably 52 in the Senate to do it. The idea that like with 50 and like the idea that people's like go to is like, we need to threaten the Dems that we have when we were like barely holding onto the fucking ship, rather than, as you said, expanding our Senate majority lead, is like, Jesus Christ, just triggers everything the fuck out of me. And then people are trying to pretend that like Biden should be able to do this unilaterally somehow. And all of this is already, as you said, like it's being pointed out that like this needs to be passed on the back of a fucking coronavirus relief bill. It's just so stupid.
Look, and that's not to say that us using big relief bills to get our legislation through isn't a tactic we should employ. We live in the age of pork power politics, so we have to do it.
No.
I think that this is something we can do, and I think that's something we should do, just strategically, because the Republicans do it. We have to do it. And if that tactic is no longer employed, then we shall get to the level of more decorum. But that isn't the age we exist in. But this is something that's such a big note, such a big impact, that it's just not something we can kind of slide in there. This isn't like an extra few million to like a few billion to Kovacs or something. This is a game changing across the board, and it's also tied to medium wage income, which I'm actually very happy about. So yeah, this is something where unless in the next few days he can convince Joe Manchin the best way we convince Joe Manchin here, honestly, is by offering him something in exchange for it. And it's something in exchange for West Virginia, like some local development or some local thing that would make it worth it for him. I don't know what that would be, because I don't know, because what if he just does what Jim Justice did and just switch parties? He could do that. And you want to know what? Mitch McConnell, right when we got the majority, approached Joe Manchin and offered it to him. That offer's on the table, and I think he did that offer not thinking that he was going to take it, but so he could put leverage on Democrats not to put a ton of pressure on him to get these progressive policies through. This is everybody knows that this is the situation Joe Manchin's in, and he has a ton of clout. It's just what more can we do?
Get more Senate seats, yeah.
I mean, but what should the process be instead if we want minimum wage to go up? Like, can
The
we?
process is
like
you need to get the Senate majority to pass the bill. That's it. It's how our government is supposed to work, right? Like.
Well, I mean, more like, I don't know that I want a flat minimum wage across the board for the entire United States. And
States can pass their own minimum wage then, right?
Yep,
they can, but like whatever the minimum wage is at, I believe most states actually leave it at that, right? Like most of them keep it at $7.25, and I feel like instead of having like an actual dollar amount, couldn't there be like an algorithm to like for like how much your citizens are making, or how much like the cost of living is around there, to decide how much people should be making per hour?
That'd be cool, but I don't think anyone's done it. And then also, just to be clear, I think 29 states right now have higher minimum wages than the federal minimum is required. So the majority of states have their own minimum wage set.
Okay, sorry. I want to respond to something in chat that's getting me a little angry. Somebody's saying, well, why don't we just make Puerto Rico and DC a state? It's more divisive to do that than it would be to do this. If we can't even get this through, how are we going to make those two places? Trust me, I live in the Metro DC area. I want DC to be a state, but you can't just snap that into existence. That's a complicated process. We haven't admitted a state since what, 1955 or something? Like there's a reason why we haven't been able to do it. Do you not think the Democrats see the obvious strategic victory of having 2 extra senators from DC, 1 to possibly 2 extra senators from Puerto Rico? Like that gives us a ton of like obvious. I think it would actually balance out the Senate to some extent and make it a little bit more fair, because it's currently screwing the Democrats due to just geographics. But if we can't get this through, how are we going to do that?
Yeah. But what are you going to do?
Also, just to comment on like the algorithm idea, I just want to say that like, I don't know, because I'm pretty familiar at this point with like the way, like with the like legislative bill drafting process at this point, and like people who draft legislation, and especially like like delegates or senators or representatives who propose legislation, they often are not familiar with economics. Usually whenever they propose bills, it's either like one of a couple things will happen, right? They'll either go to, so like at the state level in Maryland, what they'll do is like, you'll have a delegate who will approach the Department of Legislative Services and basically be like, hey, I have an idea for a bill. Can you like basically cobble me together something and give me whatever the best you could do? That's one way that's done. Sometimes interest groups will approach with like a pre-made bill. So the legislator isn't even like in the process of making one. They just kind of like glance at the bill and like, oh, okay, this seems cool, I'll submit it, right? Like oftentimes like it's like the kind of systems that you're proposing, like they can be implemented, but often like the more complex you make a bill, the less likely it is to get through the House and the Senate, because you need like essentially whenever you propose something, the rule in the back of my mind from my class and my work is that like you essentially have to bat 100, right? And the way that you do that, or one of the ways that you do that, is by making bills as simple as possible like a bill that does one thing and one thing really good is going to be super likely to be able to actually get through the House and the Senate for state or federal level. The more complicated you make it, the less likely it is to get through, right?
Mhm.
So I can agree that like having like a specific algorithm could be really cool, but like it's gonna be really hard to actually like meaningfully get that through Congress.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I just think that that's what would be necessary. Like I think that one way or the other, either some states are going to have a minimum wage that's too low, or some states are going to have one that's too high. And like it, especially with just a flat number across the board, that just to me seems ridiculous. I don't know.
I'm sorry, my chat's actually killing me. You can't just make them states. Like, no, okay. So I see some people like, okay, well, like Puerto Rico should just have a vote. No, if they had a vote and they all voted in favor of it, that doesn't make them a state. The rest of the state, like the union, would then have to accept them as a state. Like, if that's the case, then like Liberia would just be like, how do we deal with our debt crisis? We're a state now. Like, that's not how that works. And again,
No.
DC would have to still go through a process. Like, I believe its status is like enshrined. So you might. No, it's not that simple. I want them to be states. I want them. I have lived near DC. I'm a been a Metro DC area resident the entirety of my life. I want them to be a state, but you don't just clap that into existence. You'd have to win that. You'd have to win more power.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually in the Constitution that like the capital shouldn't be a state. They can just shrink the capital around like necessary buildings and make DC part of Virginia, I suppose. Now we did all kind of end up agreeing on this again. The other topic was should we abolish gender? And this isn't necessarily like I don't know, like I guess, yeah. The question just, I guess, overall is, should we abolish gender? Is that a thing that we think we should do? Do we think that one way or the other we're going to end up categorizing it in a different way? Because I think it would affect like gay
Before we
people a
wait,
lot.
before we do, what do we mean by abolish gender? Can we get that out of the way?
Well, I suppose that's that's part of the question. Like, what do people mean when they say abolish gender, and what is it that they actually want from it? I mean, is there anybody here who thinks that?
I'm sorry, chat.
Yeah,
okay, somebody just told me that all you need is a simple majority to make them a state. If you're lying to me, that's a permaban. That is a perma. I'm done. I'm rotting inside. Okay, stop.
The gender abolition arguments, I think, are always interesting, but these are like ultra pie in the sky. Like half the society in the U.S. still wants to be like tradcons in terms of like social values. The idea that we're like anywhere near like actual gender abolition is, I don't know. I mean, a lot of different people have a lot of different ideas about it, but this is one of those things that like I'm confident that if you brought up gender abolitionism, that like 85% of Americans would have no idea, or 80% of Western people period would have no idea what you're even talking about.
Well, I mean, guess, like, is it a goal that's even worthy? Like, do we think that one way or the other we're going to end up categorizing these things again in just a different way, or is everybody going to fall back into like similar pockets like we do now, or like it's a worthy goal?
Yeah, it's one of those things. I think it's impossible to say. Like, it'd be cool, I think, to have like a genderless society, but that might be something that's just kind of like so ingrained and hardwired into us that it's kind of inescapable, that even if we do our best to equalize as much as possible, we still have people that fall into like pockets of what we call male and pockets of what we call female, or at least masculine and feminine. But like, I don't know if anybody has like the exact answer on that. That's a really hard one to say, right?
So, all right, let me give like a shot at this, because I've definitely thought about it in my recent gender arc. So essentially, like, if we want, all right, so someone at one point brought up to me the idea of like a tautology, right? And while I don't think that a lot of people use that concept correctly, I think that it could be essentially like a decent goal where we get to the point where gender becomes a tautology. It's like a way to frame like getting to gender abolition, because a tautology is when, by virtue of like the logical framing of a certain kind of phrase or idea, something becomes true in all circumstances, right? Like, you become a woman just by virtue of your self-identification. It's more complicated than that, but that's basically the right idea, right? Is you want to get to the point in society where gender becomes meaningless because the only qualifier for it is self-identification, right? And so like the idea for gender abolition, at least if you look at it through this lens, is to basically like kind of erode the criteria for socially how we identify people by gender to the point where it just becomes self-identification.
Okay,
right?
so I'm sorry. I'm finishing it here, I promise. A
Oh my
2/3
God,
majority
Dylan.
vote. I'm sorry, 2/3 majority. It's not a simple majority. Holy fucking shit.
Can't
Okay,
you
I'm
just
done, I'm
type
done,
it
I'm
in the
I'm
chat?
sorry. I'm just so angry. Okay, I'm done. I'm sorry. Continue.
Okay.
But yes, I mean, like that's kind of the way that I would see it. Like essentially not abolishing like the concept of gender, but abolishing the barriers that normally prevent like gender diverse people from being able to be identified the way that they want to be. And that seems like again, like I tend to agree that's like a far and away kind of ideal. But as far as like a tangible goal, we could probably reach that, and and given enough time, right? Like with the normalization of like trans people in society, like we have like people like normalization of women with deeper voices. Before we had it where normally women were recognized to have like a specific kind of voice. You normalize trans people, suddenly the average reasonable person doesn't necessarily require people to have a specific voice to be a woman. Cool. Extreme example, and I say this with love. I'm not saying this like negatively, but like trans activists who go around, it's like women with beards. That shit's awesome to me. Like I love that shit, because the more common that is, the less likely it becomes that a person would see that and automatically gender that person as like a guy, right? Like the more that we normalize that in society, and like the more that we do this with like different characteristics, eventually we just kind of erode this away to the point where it's like the only thing that people look for is like, hey, what pronouns do you use, right? I think that's pretty cool. That seems like trans liberation. Now is that like super far and off in the future? Like, yeah, we're talking like cyberpunk future, whatever. I haven't played the game. I just assume that's the context of that game, right? Like super far in the future kind of gender ideas. But I mean, like, yeah, like that's not necessarily getting rid of gender, just making it easier for people to be able to be labeled in the way that they want to be.
Like gender presentation.
Yeah. Or just like self-identity. Yeah.
But wouldn't we lose like the idea of what it is to, I guess, be gay in a genderless society?
It's a real bit. That's a good question. I'm gonna leave that one to the future, and let them deal with that one, because yeah, that's well, then it'll become a question of like I don't know, kind of back to like what Destiny was saying, right? Then is it like, oh, are people actually more attracted to like femininity or masculinity? Maybe it turns out that actually everyone is just like some degree of pan on like a scale or a spectrum. Like, I don't know. That's something that we're probably gonna have to deal with in the future. Yeah.
Ahrelevant.
I mean, I would kind of agree with that. I think the vast majority of people are probably just attracted to like masculine or feminine characteristics. An example I like to use, there's a thing that some people say where it's like, if you're not attracted to a trans person, are you transphobic or what have you? And I feel like a knee-jerk reaction on either side can be either like yes or no. But like an example I like to give that like kind of shows why I think the language that we typically use where like you're just attracted to men or you're just attracted to women is really obsolete, is let's say that you're attracted to an individual. Let's say you're a man and you have a wife that you love and they're incredible.
Okay, here's another thing. Let's say you're right and it is a simple majority, which it could be wrong. I could be wrong because I'm trying to check this all right now. Let's say for a moment you're right. One tiny moment you're right. What about the filibuster? Joe Manchin isn't going to get rid of the filibuster, so then you run into the same problem. Then you're right back to square one. So then you need 60 votes. Or you get Joe Manchin to vote, or you get rid of the filibuster. But then you're right back to Joe Manchin problem, and then Joe Manchin is a person who controls making Puerto Rico a fucking state again. And so you're right back at square one. You're right back at square one. Unmute. That's a 5-minute timeout just for telling me what to do. 5 minutes. No, I do what I want. Okay, I wanted to yell and I yelled.
He would reasonably be straight or even necessarily gay, because we can do the same example with two, gay men or gay women. An exact same example would still hold. So it's like, I think the language that we use around I'm a man attracted to men, or I'm a woman attracted to men, or whatever is kind of insufficient, and it's more about like characteristics or different things that we deem to be attractive. I think that argument kind of explodes the whole concept of being attracted to men or women or what have you. So
Yeah. I mean, I think what got me thinking about this is the last time I talked to Destiny was on a Prime panel, and it sounded like, Destiny, you were saying that like you almost psyched yourself out of being straight by like breaking down cultural norms to say that like what you thought you liked about women was actually just not, it wasn't inherent to women at all.
Or just like thinking about, you can think about like anything, any like preconceived notion of like that. Like there's a lot of people that would say like, oh, I'd never date a black person, right? But usually it's just because you've never met any black people. You just see them on TV and you think they're all like gangbangers or something. Like,
True.
Like thinking about and like breaking down those types of things in your head, I think is usually the best way to get over them. But I mean, like you're still allowed to have your preferences afterwards. Not everybody needs to be like a pansexual, vegan, trans loving, whatever, blah, 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 whatever. Like not everybody has to be like the most like open, polyamorous, whatever in the universe. Like you can still have your preferences. It's just good to make sure that they come from a place of genuine desire and not like, oh, I think I have an internal fucking hatred for a certain group of people.
Mm-hmm. Denims.
I don't have a lot of opinions on gender abolition. I just haven't studied it nearly enough to be like to have some. I think like the idea of everyone being like bi or pan makes sense or sounds cool or something. But I've also talked to people who are like very just like incredibly straight, and it seems to be like a preference in terms of genitals more than it is anything else. So I don't know how that would fit into the picture. Not something I've just like thought about and tried to figure an answer out with gender abolition.
Dylan, you got a minute to take from yelling at your chat?
Sorry, I'm just, because now we've got back to the filibuster, so even if it was a simple majority, okay, Joe Manchin would still hold up the filibuster, so we're back to square one, so we solved nothing, okay?
Dylan, just leak the name of whoever keeps saying this shit. I just want to ban him from my chat. I don't want them to derail my chat room as much as they're derailing yours.
Okay.
Just leak me the name, man.
Yeah. Okay. So, I don't know. I don't know how to put this. It's not really a topic I engage with much. I just like being able to do men. I don't know what else to say. I just like both. So but I like men more. I mean, I don't know what I do.
I mean, I think like for me, I'm specifically interested in it because like, yeah, it's going to take a long time to do something like that. But if that's the option, if that's the direction that we think we're supposed to be heading in, then like that's we would want to raise our kids a different way, right? Like we would want to start like, and I think like lots of these things are already out there with like trans people becoming like more accepted within society. There's like butch lesbians. There's like lots of gay men are very feminine. And so like I think we're already kind of doing this, but I think we also like reinforce a lot of ideas of what it is like to be a man or to be a woman, like being a breadwinner or being a protector or being dominant, being the person who like makes the first move. Like I think that we still reinforce a lot of gender roles anyways, and so like if this is a direction that we actually wanted to try to head in, like I think it's an important conversation to have, especially when we're raising like the next generation, right?
This is actually something I've talked to my partner about this for a while, and about like would we raise our children like genderless, and it's actually something like I have no clue like how to answer that, because like the logic's like, well, what if they end up being trans? And I guess it's just then I guess it would make sense to do that, but like the odds of that are also like super duper low, but that just in case, wouldn't it be the right thing? So I guess the thing we ended up like concluding on is like, well, I guess we just give them like a kind of more of a gender neutral name and just see how stuff goes. Basically, we just like would see what they do, and then we just follow.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're gonna name them Dylan.
Yeah, Dylan Jr.
Amazing.
All right. Well, I guess we can go around, let everybody do a quick outro. I appreciate all you guys coming on. Awesome conversations. Let's see. Happy birthday, Dylan. Appreciate you taking time on your birthday coming on here. I will start with Ahrelevant and go around.
Hey, twitch.tv/Ahrelevant. I like to do a lot of political content late at night. Anybody who doesn't know what time I stream, it's roughly speaking about 5 hours later than what time it is right now, 5 or 6 hours later than what time it is right now. So absolutely dead night shift type stuff. But I like to have fun at night. I have more energy at night. I'm trying to do more panels like this, trying to make a comeback to panels. But, you know, with the schedule like that, it gets a little bit hard. Thank you for having me on, Tom.
Yeah, appreciate you coming, man. And then Riley?
Yeah, hey everyone. I am Riley Grace Rochong, and I am the #1 Elder Scrolls Online streamer on Twitch, I think right now. I'm pretty sure.
Nice.
I haven't checked the numbers, but I'm pretty sure I am. And then I also sometimes talk politics, twitch.tv/Riley Grace Rochong, and then Twitter, etc. I don't know. Check me out if you want to. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Denims.
Hi, I am Denims, twitch.tv/Denims. I stream every day at 6 a.m. PST. I talk about politics. I cover the news. I react Andy. That's about it.
Awesome. And then Dylan?
Hey, I'm Dylan Burns TV. That's DYLAN TV. You can find me on Twitch and YouTube. I talk to conservatives a lot. I try to engage with them a decent amount because I want to concentrate my efforts more talking with the right and engaging with the right and seeing what we can make of that. I host the Hippy Dippy Roundtable every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is also uploaded on YouTube. And I also cover a lot of foreign policy content. I've been trying to play more games more and diversify my content, and I'm actually going full-time streaming now. So I'd appreciate if you supported me on either platform. And if you want to check me out on Twitter, that's DYLANBURNS1776, because I love this country. That's it.
Awesome. And then Destiny.
Hey, I'm Destiny. I stream at twitch.tv/Destiny. Talk politics, philosophy, play video games. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, we're gonna still be streaming. If any of you guys want to stick around and chat for a little while, you're welcome to stay. Outside of that, chat, appreciate you guys joining us and watching. We're streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. We do philosophy, politics, and religion mostly here on this channel. But I mostly stream like from 2 in the morning till 8 in the morning most of the time. And then on every Wednesday, we do panels. I believe next week we're going to be doing an all leftist panel. So make sure you come back next Wednesday at 9:15 Eastern time. Outside of that, thanks for coming, guys. If you're not sticking around, you can go ahead and see yourselves out. Later.